What's up,
Yeah.
Dylan?
Not much, not much. I just saw that all my favorite conservatives were concentrated in one place, and I was like, damn. As a fellow conservative, I have to join in.
You'd sure like it if conservatives would be concentrated more often, wouldn't you?
Perhaps there's some camp he would send us to.
I mean, look, all I'm saying
He's
is
gonna
when
destroy us
when it
all.
comes to military sign up, I think the whites get in this file, and like that's all I'm saying.
Hey, you said it.
Look.
I was amazed to hear.
I was a
Dylan
witness.
Did
I was
he
amazed to hear
actually?
Dylan- He did. He made the argument for the profiling of Muslims in the military. Yes,
Let's add context. Let's add context. Okay, so
Send
we
me the clip.
I did a thing where I put a thread a while ago. I put a thread together about how white nationalism is a big national security threat. That the vast majority of soldiers agree. Army has already recognized this. The vast majority of terror attacks post 9/11 have been white nationalist terror attacks, white supremacist terror attacks, and that there have been U.S. Army personnel in the military who have planned mass casualty events by sending information to neo-Nazi groups. And this is a legitimate threat. And I think that the stand-down order to recognize the threat of extremism, and at the time, I thought because that's how it was being portrayed a lot, that it was a white national, and it was to deal with white nationalist extremism, because that's what was being highlighted, because that's the major threat in the military. And so, me and Rob, we got into a little thing about whether we need to pay the same amount of attention to leftist extremism to white nationalist extremism. And my thing was, I thought that white nationalist extremism is a much bigger threat in the military, because in my opinion it's been proved to be. And so I was fine with us concentrating on white nationalist extremism. And then eventually he was like, does that include, when it comes to white people, did we investigate the white people for white extremism? And I said, well, I don't know many black extremists, so I guess I assume so. And it got dragged from there to eventually, would you profile Muslims for Muslim extremism? And that's where that quote comes from. So it's not that I stood up on a hill and was like, I want to profile the Muslims.
Ironically enough, aren't most of the people who end up committing acts of terrorism against, especially police officers, they end up being veterans who are black, and and they came back to. This is a thing.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it happened in California and in Texas.
Well, okay, so I can think of maybe a couple instances, but the vast majority of data I've seen that the majority of terror attacks that are committed in the United States post 9/11 are white nationalist terror attacks. And when it comes to specifically inside the military, as in a threat to our national security, in that instance. I'm talking about these planning from neo-Nazi groups to infiltrate the military, try to use training to.
But if I may, so first off, I looked into this. So from studies back in 2011, it actually talks about extremism and gang problems, which I was actually amazed. I didn't know this, how big of a problem these things are in the military. So they've been warning of this since 2011. And certainly that includes groups like neo-Nazis, KKK. It also includes Bloods, Crips, MS-13. It includes motorcycle gangs like the Hells Angels, the Mongols. It includes gangs like the Vice Lords, etc. So there was commissions that have been done on this since as back as 2011. The point I was making is this. The original tweet I made was, we see how people in Washington are blowing up the threat of white supremacy. Even we could argue about how big of a threat it is, but they're applying it to other things. They accuse things of being white supremacists that aren't necessarily white supremacists. So much so that they're saying it was a white supremacist insurrection at the Capitol. And you hear people like John Brennan saying, we need a 9/11 ISIS hunting commission to go after white supremacists and nationalists and libertarians. He's lumping all these things together. And so my fear when I put that tweet was great, are they going to go after all extremists or just one set of extremists? The conversation I was having with Dylan is this. I'm trying to figure out how this would work. If it's literally just hey, everyone who applies for the military, we're going to go through their social media and we're going to see if they have connections to extremist groups. My point is, why not just focus on all extremist groups?
After the conversation, I did more research, and I know we had a back and forth in the comments about it.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know the exact specifics, so I researched the specifics. It looks like, and I found some reports from 2012 on how they tried to address this before, to not much effect, but it's going to be how once they have stand down orders to deal with big things, they did it to deal with sexual assault in the military, which is a huge issue because of dealing with sexual assault. So they're going to basically have people stand down, be like, hey, everybody, this is an issue. This extremism in the military is not the way to go. Obviously, it's a problem. And there might be more filtering when it comes to people entering it. And so it didn't have to do with racial profiling or stuff like that. But of course, they're going to continue to filter people who are part of extremist organizations. But I would still like to point out the fact that when you're talking about gang violence and obviously gangs and gang members using skills learned in the military and gang activity is bad, but the goals of gangs and neo-Nazi white supremacist groups are different. The groups of gangs is to get money, power, and build influence on the street level by selling drugs and committing violent crimes. The goals of a lot of these groups, like that neo-Nazi groups, is to actively kill American service personnel and overthrow the United States government. The type of security threats these two things are to the United States are totally different. It'd be like me pointing to 9/11 and saying, okay, sure, that's bad, but have I ever told you about the mafia? Well, the mafia had completely different goals, completely different intentions.
Well, I don't know. Again, 9/11 is hardly analogous to what I mean.
Well,
yes,
but you get what I'm saying. I could have pointed to any terror attack, right?
But
or
here's
any
the
group.
thing. But it's still, we would be concerned with it, and it's not as simple as you're saying, because the study I read said that a lot of what was happening was you had a lot of gangs that were then dealing in human trafficking. For example, you have people. MS-13 was getting a lot of people in the U.S. military that was then smuggling guns and using the tactics they learned to work with Mexican cartels to human traffic people across the board. So that's an example. Also, I'm saying, and the other thing is, we would want to look at the total, even though the targets would be different, we would want to look at the total amount of destruction that is caused by these specific groups. So no doubt that a neo-Nazi, look, I've it's weird to say this, but I'm just going to come out and say it. Like, I think that the motivations of a drug dealer that's just trying to, sell drugs like Scarface to get rich, that's a better motivation, believe it or not, than a neo-Nazi who's a scumbag and wants to kill. Like, I get that. Like, don't get me wrong. But still, the amount of bodies that tally up, that's what we should be concerned with. But the point is this, right? Like, so my point take
Dylan's
why
concern
not
was just national security.
Right,
You know
but still, if you're going to,
I don't
It's
want to
funny.
for you, but that's what
the
I
way it's
was
been
getting
explained.
from it.
Go ahead. I'll finish my point after.
No, I was just going to say that I was going to add, because one thing that came up or comes up with a lot of like left-leaning people and socialist types is like that they're worried about state-sponsored oppression, and like that they're worried about like genocide being carried out by a state apparatus, right? And you don't hear that as much when it's the state apparatus building up their surveillance network and their police state to monitor the right wing. But what's super interesting is that just recently, one of the arrests that occurred after the Capitol riots was actually a leftist who was flagged as being potentially dangerous.
I heard about that.
Because he was being posting online, I guess, on social media about how I quote, I don't know what to do anymore. Like these things, like it feels like things are out of control. And this person was arrested by the FBI for this in question. And I mean, it's hilarious to me that these people don't think that this is just like a power grab by the status quo.
Can I ask you a question, Endernax?
Sure.
Okay.
When you say these people, do you just mean like generally like the left? Am I like lumped in with it? Like when we use the like these terms that like cover broad amounts of people,
I would say
what
when I'm saying them, I am not referring to triple parentheses them, just to clarify. I am referring to the people online who would cheer this happening to right-wingers, right? The people online who were happy that individuals were getting taken off social media and that, like there were arrests being made after the Capitol riot. That's what I'm referring to. It's not like I'm saying.
Wait. Do you not think we should be happy that people who destroyed or assaulted media and destroyed their property or any? Should we not be like?
Sure. No. Wait. I have no problem with that. I'm talking more along the lines of the people who are like, these people are traitors. They're white supremacists. There could be no unity. Like it's the people calling for the 9/11 style commission who are calling, sitting members of Congress traitors, who are accusing them of like sponsoring other Congress members' deaths. So
right, and let me say, and so this is this is the context of the conversation I was having with Dylan. It's just this. I don't know what this process is going to look like, but if we're just investigating people's social media, why not take out all extremists? Even if I grant you, well, white supremacy is worse. We could get into that, right? Certainly the motivations for white supremacy are the lowest of the low. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Any racial supremacy attacks, I have more contempt for any racial supremacist than any other ideology. Like I said, even drug dealers, personal greed, I could respect more than racial supremacy. But aside from that, wouldn't we root out all extremists? And this is the part that shocked me, Dylan, was my fear is, the reason I put the original tweet is I feel that this could be applied to profiling people based on characteristics that they don't deserve to be profiled, such as race, such as political affiliation, etc. And I fully expected you to say...
That fear's gone, though, right?
Well, we'll see how it plays out, but on paper, they're saying that's not how it will play out. But here's the problem. We see people in Washington that are exploiting this fear of white supremacy to attack people that they don't deserve. And then when I see people like you, that I would think, if you just asked me before that conversation, hey, someone like Dylan Burns, do you think he'd be against racial profiling? I'd be like, of course. So when I see even someone like you, because this is what you said, let's be honest, you said this. I said, so they're just going to investigate everyone equally. They're not going to single people out based on race. And you were like, well, actually, to be a white supremacist, you have to be white. So yeah, I guess they start with the white people.
That's not the exact line I said. I said most likely they're going to run all their names through a system. And that means most likely all the names. And then I talked about my personal thing that I wouldn't have a problem when you're looking to white supremacy, paying extra attention to the white people, since they are the people who are going to get recruited into white supremacy.
That's called profiling. That's what we did with the TSA.
But even then,
Muslims
Dylan,
for decades.
Wait. Okay, let's talk about this a little different too. Now, we can say that it's racial profiling, like whatever word on it, whatever. I don't care. I'll bite the bullet. Okay. The difference between somebody profiling somebody walking down the street, somebody profiling somebody going onto an airport, the difference between that and what we're doing is you joining the military is a voluntary thing. We don't have a draft in this country. We don't have mandatory service. We do have a draft, but we don't have mandatory. Let me finish. I would like to finish. This is something you voluntarily sign up to do when you join the military, right? You are putting yourself into national security. You're saying the government, check me for this, check me for that. I would like to sign up. Same thing when it goes into the CIA. When you join the CIA and NSA, you actually have to go through psychological evaluations where they put shit up to your head, ask you questions, do all that. Vast majority of government jobs, I would say the vast majority of jobs, if they did that to average Americans, that would be horrible. That would be disgusting if we asked every single American to sign up to having psychological evaluations so that our employers could have that on us. But when we talk about the type of work that is being done at the NSA, or the type of work that's being done at the CIA, this makes sense considering the type of information they're going to have at their fingertips. And when we talk about the military and the type of power we're giving these people with guns to go overseas and learn combat training, I think taking certain precautions to make sure those people aren't part of these groups that is becoming a bigger and bigger national security threat, fine by me.
But saying taking certain precautions is different than racial profile.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I was
like what you're saying here. What you're
we already do this, just so you know, before you join.
To get into
obviously
the
not doing it
CIA or
enough.
the FBI, you have to be vetted, and it's a harsh process. So if you're talking about vetting for the military, right? If you're talking about doing
that's the point. You can't do this based on skin.
And again, it's not. This is not even a hard position I hold.
Hey, listen. Energy's getting up. I like it, right? But whenever I'm trying to listen to what Madman is saying, and I can't even get it because everybody else chomping at the bit.
That's why I shut up, right?
Right. So Madman, finish what
I
you were
just
gonna
want to
say.
be really clear about Dylan's position, because Rob was there and I was not. And so it does strike me as being a little shocking. You're saying that low-level entry military personnel, everyone should be vetted, but you're going to specifically target white people for being affiliated with white nationalism.
Well, I would target someone if we know they're affiliated with white nationalism. But my position, and I even said this during the thing at the end of the day, because it wasn't really something I thought about, it was something I was kind of thinking openly, was basically the idea that at the end of the day, though, and while it's not something I have huge protests about when it comes to this specific issue, I think the best thing to do is to run everybody's name through it, right? So that's, I think, the best thing to do. But I don't have too many objections to the second thing. I think just for the cause of cordiality, and just so there won't be a bigger uproar, and to avoid all of this in the first place, we should just do it the way where we have everybody sit through it. We have everybody go through it. We run everyone's name through the system. So it's not even a hard position that I hold. It was just something But my main point has always been about, I think white nationalism is a much bigger threat, the one that needs special attention compared to all the other threats. Right?
Okay. So can we let's focus on that then. And I'll accept, look, one of the things that's difficult, and if people don't content stream, this is difficult. If you're talking to people that disagree and something comes up in the court and you're thinking through things as you're talking, like I'm not going to hold you to like I've done the same thing. I've said something, then later I go back. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Now that I'm thinking, but let's talk. Like, if you want to talk about the white nationalism thing, that's fine. Yeah. So I've seen different.
Well, to be clear, I didn't come in here to talk about it. I just came in here because I saw all my favorite conservatives.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like something to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about whatever. I'm glad all you guys are here. I mean, so this is kind of nice for me to have everybody in here.
Also, do you guys
like the opposite end of 5 people that ideologically disagree? Normally, it's one of us on a panel where there's 7-8 people that disagree.
Do you guys like my shirt, by the way?
Ends our next. Look, I can't see it. Come closer.
I hate Mondays, and I also masterminded the secret bombing of Cambodia.
Incredible.
It's good.
Wow. Wow.
So let me ask you this. A lot of people, left-leaning people, have came on my channel recently, and they're citing this Center for Strategic Intelligence survey.
This is so stupid.
That says, and so this is what says. So basically, it's a study of political extremism in the United States since 1994, right? And it says that the bulk. I do think that you're overstating what it says. I think maybe the plurality.
I don't think I ever sourced that.
Oh no, I'm not saying you did. I was going to ask if you're familiar with it, but we could bring it up. It's CSIS is the acronym that it uses. But it says this is supposedly a credible source. It says since '94, it says the plurality of attacks have been right-wing extremism, but I don't think the majority.
Whoa, is Lecture Fan joining right now?
So yeah. Slow down, everybody. Slow down just a minute. Lecture Fan's getting ready to come in. Lecture Fan, if you can hear me.
Lecture Fan is coming. We all got to start talking really fast.
When I looked at this,
hold on. I got to give Lecture Fan some special instructions. He's joined the Wolf's Den. Make sure you click on the rules, right, buddy, and hit that thumbs up, and that's going to open up all the channels for you.
So I've looked into
He's not already in the Discord?
Max number of people. Join one of the voice channels, man,
so this is
and I'll
what we're
drag you in.
talking about. So we're talking about the escalating terrorism problem in the United States, or
right?
Yeah. I think that's
okay. I just want to be clear that I didn't, when I made my thread, I used data from actually like polling of military personnel, polling of statements from military staff. I did not use the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
Wait. That's different, right? Because the polling that you're citing, I understand it's not the same, but that's not citing. You're conflating two things. You're saying, well, a bunch of regular members of the military think that white supremacy is a bigger problem.
I said
but
that,
then you're
and
also
the
saying
military staff. That's
right.
both.
But then
they
you're
both
also
agree.
saying, and the actual attacks and the planning we've seen. That's not reliant on what people feel. That's objective data.
Yes, that is objective data, which I still think that. It might be a plurality, it might be a majority. I might have used the incorrect word there. But what I'm saying is that compared to all the other threats, and specifically within the United States military, that white supremacy seems to be the biggest issue, and that's why I think it needs special attention. If something, for example, let's say that there's a row of houses, right, and they all have fires, but one house has a bigger fire than the rest of them, right? I think that house deserves extra water to put out the fire. And that's why I'm saying this deserves extra attention. Not because I don't think that like a communist bomb would not do the same amount of damage as a Nazi bomb, but because that one seems to have the most bombs in it, you know?
I have something that I hope is a fair question as far as going about this strategically when you're vetting these military personnel or possible military personnel. I want to know, if you are to vet these people or run their names through a system, I'm assuming you're going to use some sort of an internet database that has some sort of words that are triggers or red flags. If you were possibly a neo-Nazi, I don't see how it would be possible to have a platform now on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or whatever. I mean, I don't see that it's those. They already have terms of services that get rid of these types of behaviors. So if you're really talking about putting this sort of a thing into action, what other means would you have besides vetting people via the internet?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to. I'm trying to find data on what I said.
I think the point she's making is that most of these neo-Nazis probably aren't posting on Facebook or Twitter. Oh, so will it be difficult to find? Will they be underground?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think you need multiple filters. I don't think it's as simple as like
he wants extreme vetting.
Right.
He wants extreme vetting.
I do extreme vetting. Yeah. I do want extreme vetting for the military. When we are saying, here's a
gun. It's voluntary to move to the United States, too. So I suppose we could have extreme vetting for them, too. I just make sure, right?
Oh, I mean, okay.
Yes.
Anyway. I mean, I don't know what you expected me to say. Like, I'm a big supporter of immigration, but I mean... I guess it also depends on like if it becomes.
What does extreme vetting look like?
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Vetting. I just want to know, what does it look like?
Well, I
gotta ask Trump.
I wish I had an exact statement for you, but
this is the problem that I've been having with like the whole debate forums that we've been having at Twitch, is that they're not really solution based, and if we can all agree that there's a problem, I want to be able to find a solution of some sort. So if we're saying that we all think that military personnel should be vetted, I want to know what that looks like.
So I would say that the reason, okay, okay.
I know, Dylan, it's okay, buddy. I just want to take a moment to welcome Lecture Fan into the room.
Right? He's like deafened and muted, so he can't.
Yeah.
He's just here.
You cut Dylan off for someone who's deaf and mute. Come on.
Conservative bias in media showing once again.
Even people that can't talk get placed.
I realize that there's a lot of arguing along political lines when everybody's in the wolf's den, right? We're all family.
By the way, Dylan, I really respect you for standing up against the hate that Rush Limbaugh's getting. Like, people are like celebrating his death, and I saw your title and I was like, wow, like.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things I need to respond to, but I'll respond to that first. Sure. I don't like mocking anyone when they die, and I hold this for literally all human beings. So if you're gonna be like, what about this terrorist? I'll be like, yeah, I've really, sometimes I'll slip up because nobody's perfect, but I don't want to pretend that's a good thing. I'm not gonna go after other people for doing it, because I also know the pain Rush Limbaugh caused through his words, from him celebrating people who died from AIDS, or him calling like the president's 13-year-old daughter a bitch, or him like saying that immigrants should not have the right to free speech. Like, there's a lot of like things you can go through the history of things he said through the majority of his presidency. Oh God, that would have been, you thought liberals hated Trump. So my stream was simply talking about his impact on the country and why I think it's negative, and going through his past statements. But I don't want to go mock him, because I also have had multiple family members die, and I know what that kind of stuff could do. But he's also a public figure, and it's important to talk about his legacy. So I think it's indecent, so I don't personally practice in the mocking. Now on to what you were talking about when it comes to panel shows. The difficult thing about panel shows is people don't just. I think we're working from an incorrect basis, because people don't always agree there's a problem. Some people think there is a problem, but there isn't really a problem with what's going on in a country, right? Some people might say that there's a problem with the wealthy have too much money and the poor have too little money, and somebody could say, actually, I think trickle down economics works and this way, and the wealthy actually have a decent amount of money because they worked for it. Or somebody could disagree about the basics about an event that happened. For example, Matt Gaetz went on front of the whole country after the Capitol riots and said there was actually all these Antifa people due to this thing that this data from this facial detection software, and that was a disagreement of facts between them and other people, because later they dug through the facial recognition software and it turned out to be those people were actually white nationalists who were profiled on Antifa websites. And so, since we're not even like always agree that we even have an issue, you can disagree with what the problem is, you can disagree about what the facts are, and then you can disagree about how to fix the problem. So there's multiple reasons why people aren't just all coming together in like a circle singing kumbaya about, well, how do we fix it? Because a lot of people is like, fix what? Sometimes.
Right, and I agree with
that's
that.
True.
That's the point that I was trying to bring up with the CSIS study. So real quick, if this study's credible, it says that right-wing extremism has been the leading the biggest plurality of extremism for political terror or for domestic terrorism. Did you see how many people it said have died since 1994 from right-wing extremism?
I have not.
354.
Okay, and how many left-wing extremism?
If we are saying that this is the,
I'm curious though, because we're saying that number like it's small. But
right.
Relative to left-wing extremism, how big was that?
Well, the left-wing. So there's problems with the study that I've been going on beyond that. For example, but But let's concede that that's true. Let's just assume that this study's right. So left-wing extremism was less than that. I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was something like 50 or 60 people. So it's about 1/5. Nonetheless, we're talking about saying that the way this is being spun is the biggest existential threat to our country. And you're even saying that people in the military were polled as saying China,
that's
and
from the Military
cyber
Times, I would like to
and
say
then
that.
white supremacy, right? And we're talking about
Well, it was China, Iran, that ISIS and white supremacy were on the same level.
Right. So like when we're talking about actual threats to our country, like again, I have no love for white supremacy. Any white supremacist terrorists, like I hope that they are vetting people to make sure they're not part of these terrorists. I seriously do. And if that means increased vetting, fine. My problem is that it's clearly being weaponized by people in positions of power that want to consolidate power and divide us because they understand by talking about this boogeyman, and by the way, a lot of right-wing people might not like this that I say this, just like they tried to demonize everyone that was a Muslim after 9/11. I see this as the same type of thing happening over and over again. And I think we have to be sober-minded when we talk about the extent of the problem, because if you turn on like CNN or MSNBC, you would think that white supremacy is this horrible thing that every day there are people fearful for their lives because they're just white supremacists on the street mowing people down. And that's not really the reality that we see.
Well, I would say that I think that type of dialogue has been used for deflection on a lot of issues, right? For example, climate change. A lot of people will say, with the way the liberals talk about climate change, you'd think everyone was drowning, right? But the left is trying to highlight a certain issue that they think of as grave, which I would say that's also a national security threat. The military is actually preparing for the effects of climate change and how that's going to affect our military operations around the world. They just highlight it differently. But when it talks about like white supremacy and it's and it being a threat. I mean, when we think about ISIS, for example, when's the last major ISIS attack domestically in this country?
Okay, before we get off on like a tangent, right? The conservatives are actually getting together tonight, Dylan, because we're going to be figuring out how to unionize, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's why Lecture Fans is in here too, so we can talk about all that stuff. So before we get off on another tangent, like we got about 5 minutes that we can dedicate to finishing this topic up, but that's what I want to be able to get Lecture Fan in here so we can talk about doing that.
Okay, well, obviously, I will do my best to union bust you. Okay, I'll bust up your union.
Thank God.
You're welcome.
Is this a right to work platform?
Yeah, this is a right to work platform, of course.
Yeah. What's the? But no, Dylan, honestly, let me say this. I do think I see. Like, let me still make an argument. I think that there is even though there's not a lot of attacks, the potential for a catastrophic attack is what we're worried about, right? So like, even if I would say, well, only 300 people have died of white supremacy since 1994 or whatever the number may be. But if they get their hands on like some military equipment or could, God forbid, make a dirty bomb or something, that could be catastrophic, right? So, but do you see my point that we use this sort of fear of things like that, of this potential high risk situation, to strip people of their rights in a bad way? And when we see this being done, I think massively blown out of proportion, I think that it's a very negative thing that's being done to demonize, cause division, and to strip people of rights.
So I think it was 354. And what I'm talking about here is there's also something that's not included, and that's just those who died, not those potential deaths from failed terror attacks too. This is something that, and the reason why this isn't covered is because the media doesn't get anything out of it, or because there's no profit that can be made off of it. But when somebody, if there was a terror attack that was planned, I mean, think about all the times on the World Trade Center, there were terror attacks that didn't have the same impact and was not reported to the amount it should have been because it didn't kill 3,000 people that eventually were killed during 9/11, right? And if we see the escalating polling data or the escalating concern for military staff, or how this is now happening within the United States military. No longer is it people getting skills, going out and then committing attacks. We can point back to like things like McVeigh or that, which isn't white supremacy, but anti-government extremism. We see this happening within the military. And so I want the problem not to get any worse. And I would say, while you could say that the portrayals have caused division, I would actually say it is the white supremacy that is causing the division. It is those people who want to cause division. They want to commit these attacks because think about how Dylan Roof, if you listen to what Dylan Roof said about his attacks, he's very open. Like, I'm not going to kill every black person on the planet through this church shooting. I want it to cause division. I want it to be a thing that tears people apart. I want it to be that. And the way it's going to do that is you have those attacks, then you have people debate over the issues, the debate of what he said, and it seems to continue to escalate since Dylan Roof have done that shooting. Since he did that shooting, the amount of racism, white supremacy, and white nationalism seen by minority service members and service members overall in the military has increased. Over half of minority service members in the United States military say they see white supremacy within the military. Now, we can say that's just left-wing bias, but I would like to listen to what the military members, these are not like highfalutin staff, these are the people who actually have to hold the rifles and get killed overseas. I would like to listen to those people and listen to their concerns.
But look, this is the final thing I'll say about this.
I will be back soon. I hope that you guys enjoy yourselves while I'm gone, but I'm taking just a mini break and I'll be back.
Thank you, man.
Nice hearing from you. I'll just finish up with this.
Nice to hear from you guys too.
This is what I'll say. Like, I don't see how you could draw a direct line from Dylan Roof to, oh, that's why now we think.
Well, it's not just that. I'm saying,
okay,
the increase.
I would say that. Like, if you look at the curriculum that's now being taught in places like the Army, with the idea of teaching the white privilege book, with pushing things from the 1619 Project, etc., it's no wonder that people think white supremacy is a bigger problem. Because when you're being taught at your training courses that the country was founded on white supremacy, that all white people have privilege, that there are microaggressions and all this stuff, then yes, when you're told to look for this stuff, you're going to see more around. Furthermore, when you look at actual white nationalists, such as Richard Spencer, I saw an interview with him in like 2016. He said the biggest recruitment tool for people around him, it wasn't people like Dylan Roof. You know who it was? It was people like the Nation of Islam. It was people like radical activists in Black Lives Matter. Because the more extremism there is on one side, the more it causes extremism on the other side. And one of the blind spots that I think you have is, although even if you're right about the data, which again, I would love, no one's going to think it's a good conversation except probably me and you to get heavily into this data, which I would love to do. But for now, we'll leave that a go because that could take hours. One of the problems is, it's not
I'm sorry, I don't want to stop you, but I'll forget. I'm looking, they're teaching the 1619 book.
They're teaching. I'll find exactly what they're teaching. They're teaching things
I'm looking it
like
up and
that.
I can't find it.
Okay, I don't know that they're exactly reading from the 1619 Project, but they're teaching like Robin DiAngelo or whatever, like the white privilege stuff. They're teaching that sort of stuff in the Army. I will send you what they. This is why Trump stopped this from occurring in the military, and people said it was so bad. But anyways, I'll just finish up with this. Like, yes, looking at the potential or the actual deaths or destruction or potential deaths and destruction, I don't disagree with you. That's something we should be doing. But also we should be looking at the political clout that these organizations have. So where is the clout for the KKK or white nationalism? There is none. It is a death sentence to even tangibly be associated with them. And yet we see people like the Nation of Islam and their founder, Louis Farrakhan, literally taking pictures with almost all of the Black Congressional Caucus, taking pictures with Barack Obama. We see that people that pushed forth this ideology and extremism when it comes to groups that are, like, literally the Nation of Islam was covered on national television, running security, being thanked at the funeral of George Floyd, acting like this is some sort of noble group. This is a despicable Black nationalist separatist group, and they literally have connections to people with political power. So if we ever started to put our focus on them and how dangerous that is, that they don't need to have as much as the terror power, because you're a terrorist when you have no other options left to you.
So
people that are Black separatists and Black nationalists actually have a voice that could be spread throughout popular culture in Congress.
So I just want to. I have waited. Okay, like, come on. I didn't even. I haven't said anything in a while. But I'll just say.
But I got to write everything down because that was the whole.
I'm just going to say that the CSIS data specifically. So the way they recorded data in the past is different than the way they started recording data in the last 5 years or so. They started lumping in a lot of religiously based terrorism in with right-wing terrorism, which may sound fair to left-leaning individuals. But I guarantee you that when you're looking at the motivations of somebody who, like the Angels of Christ or something, I forget what their name is, but like a group that bombs abortion clinics, and the motivations of somebody who is like an ethno-nationalist, somebody who talks about all of these Jewish conspiracies and wants to like create neo-Nazi, whatever, right? Create a new right.
Okay.
There's differences in motivation here and in practices that I think matter enough that they should be kept separate. And they used to keep religious terrorism separate, and they had a different section.
Okay, so I just want to be very clear. I have never, ever used any of this data to support any argument I made. I can understand you having a problem with some data from some organization that I've never brought up before, but it's not relevant to anything I've ever talked about. Okay, I just want to make that clear. Now, when it comes to what Rob said, when we talk about this, so I don't know of any picture where Luis Farrakhan took a picture with the majority of the Black Caucus. I do know the picture from 2005 with Obama, but I don't know a picture where he took it with the majority of the Black Caucus. If you mean the existing Black Caucus, or you're talking from like, I know this is a 2005 photo. Now, when it comes to these instances you're talking about, of course, the certain sides, extremes of certain sides can motivate other sides. But I also would like to say that, look at the Proud Boys, for example. This is a extremist organization, and I will take that 100% open up that it is an extremist organization. And I think what was said at the debates increased the recruitment by a ton. And I can tell you from Proud Boys that were on this platform that many of you actually know, and I'm talking CTV and Endernax knew, actually have told me that yes, this actually increased our recruitment levels because I actually had to fill out so many forms, do this. Their recruitment exploded. And I think the type of situations that have helped increase white nationalist groups or far-right groups in recent years have been the extremely partisan and increasing types of rhetoric we're seeing. And I'm going to bring it back to him. I know this is going to get a lot of eye rolls from the former president of the United States. I think he was a big bastion for that. I think he helped wave the flames of it. When you have a president who was elected, who openly said we should ban Muslims from entering the United States, that is a calling card for those people. People are going to hear that rhetoric and think, was that a legitimate idea? Should we ban Muslims from entering the United States? Should we do that? And then he goes through the whole process and even telling it. Rudy Giuliani was open about this, saying on TV, yes, Trump asked me how we could legally do a Muslim ban. And then we talk about Rush Limbaugh, who was the person who helped build up towards this rhetoric, somebody who has been the voice of conservative Radio America for decades now, who has made a career off of mocking gay people who die with AIDS, who made a career of calling black sports teams, saying they look like the Crips and the Bloods fighting each other. Somebody who would say that every person who looks like a mugshot photo looks like Al Sharpton. I mean, this type of dialogue has been escalating for years, and it's reached a tipping point. And I think that line of the escalating dialogue and the escalating narrative of recent years reaching a breaking point with the Capitol riots, where there were white supremacists there. I saw so many of Nick Fuentes' group there, it was actually insane. I saw America First flags every 10 to fucking 100 feet. I saw an America First flag. Nick Fuentes was there. People with 6 million weren't enough hoodies were there. This is facial recognition software further prove this. People who are tied to the white students union movement. And I think since they were part of the group that rushed the Capitol, they've been playing this behind the scenes. If I see this spike in communist terrorism in the United States, or Black Lives Matter starts organizing like terror attacks, I'll be with you. I just don't see it. I don't see it anywhere. Terror. I will stand up 100% and say this. And I've been consistent on this, Ender. You can laugh at me. Rioting is not terrorism. And I don't think anybody who rioted at the Capitol was a terrorist. I think the person who planted a bomb was a terrorist. And I think many of the people who participated there were white nationalists and acting seditious, but that was not terrorism. And I'll be consistent on this because I don't like giving the government power by just calling anything terrorism. I want to be very specific with my wording. But that was sedition, and it most certainly... You don't think rioting against the you don't think rushing the White House... I mean, not the White House.
Wait, that's a good point. Is rushing the White House sedition?
Wait, let me finish. Rushing the Capitol building with ties to
literally... Found the ties there.
They found the ties there, so they used the ties.
That
so they
story's
took it.
Been debunked.
So they took. Wait. So if I find rope on the street and then I chase a politician with a noose, do you not see that since I found the rope on the street, that's not me going to do something with that rope? If I found a gun on the street, picked it up, and then chased a politician, would that not no longer be attempted murder because I found the gun and didn't bring it?
Should we listen to what the prosecutors are saying? right? Shouldn't we listen to what the prosecutors that charged the man with the zip ties said? Because the story that they're saying is that he did not bring zip ties, that instead he found zip ties there and claimed that he took those zip ties to stop police from zip tying other supporters that were there. That's what the prosecutors have alleged.
That's wait, no, that's what the prosecutor said the man said, right?
Well, I don't know.
So that's different. Wait, that's so different. That's very different.
I need to moderate because I heard whoa way too many times.
So hold on. I'd like to respond to that though.
I know, right? But now we got to bring the energy back down a little bit, right? I like it, but whenever we get to the whoa moment, then it's like, oh, geez, there goes my ears, right? So, all right, between the two of you, figure out who's going and go.
Dylan.
Okay. So if the prosecution says this is what the guy said, is a lot different than the prosecution said, hey, it turns out he didn't take up the zip ties for bad reasons. He actually did it for legitimate reasons. That's the prosecution coming out and saying, this person says he found them there and says he was going to use them for good reasons. That's not the prosecution saying, oh, the zip ties were completely innocent and everything was fine. That's just them reporting, kind of being public about what's going on with the case and what the other side, what the person is alleging. That's completely different. Like, for instance, let's say I said that Rob Norris said that he did this. Let's assume you did something bad. That he did this bad thing for completely different reasons and was actually not bad. Is different. I'm saying what you said, not what I believe. Right? If I'm just reporting,
I think CTV like completely crashed.
He did. Wow.
I think so. Yeah, his stream went down and.
No. Well, but listen,
left-wing censorship.
Of course, that's different, right? But what they actually charge him with, we'll see what they actually charge him with. Nonetheless, right? The initial story, just like the initial story of beating an officer to death with a fire extinguisher, we don't have proof that the initial story of they brought zip ties because they planned to take hostages. Now it switches to he grabbed the zip ties. He claims that he just grabbed them to avoid other people from getting zip ties.
He's going to claim whatever he wants for his defense, of course.
Right. Okay, so then let's see your proof that he was planning to take hostages. I'm willing to see the proof.
I think. Honestly, you know what? I'll say this. I don't have a written letter from the guy saying I'm a terrorist, I'm going to take hostages. And you know what? I also don't have a written letter that the people who were shouting hang Mike Pence weren't actually saying mang Mike Pence. We're saying something in Chinese. I have no written proof. But I mean, I think I'm not.
Is this? I'm just showing. I think that it's overblown, and I think that we could see the story changing. But even if we accept that was a man with zip ties,
it's not going to matter ultimately. Because I sit here and I look at this and I look at only 7%. Well, guess what? I bet there was only 7% of Trump supporters were violent. And anyways, and the summer of love, right? Nobody gives a fuck. Nobody gives a 7%. Wait! Shut up! Let me make my point. Okay. Nobody gives a singular fuck. Wait, who?
CTV's gone.
Froze. He'll be back.
All right. Well, it doesn't matter. I'll still make the point, which is this: nobody actually cares anymore. There's nobody cares about hypocrisy. Nobody cares about making a point. Nobody cares about being correct anymore. Both sides have gotten into their camps. Nobody's talking to each other seriously because we're not operating on the same moral level playing field. Both sides don't care. They'll end up justifying the actions of their side regardless of what happens because ultimately, they were fighting for racial justice. Oh well, they were very upset about the election results and they legitimately thought that the election was stolen and they were very enthused by blah 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 blah. It doesn't matter because ultimately no one's going to end up caring. Come summer, I bet you both camps will revert to where they were before, and they'll be even more partisan and uncaring and unfettered at their approach. That's what's going to happen because you don't get away with having 90 days of violent protest in Seattle and Portland where they throw Molotov cocktails at police and engage in violence. No, you can roll your eyes and laugh all you want, but those people are legitimate terrorists. The person who brought the bomb to the federal courthouse, and I think was it Seattle or Portland? I don't know which one of the two. It was one of them. Whatever. Those people are terrorists. They deserve to be arrested. Yep. There was no accountability until after the election because they were scared. They were scared that they were going to get Donald Trump reelected if they made a big deal out of it. So they let them do whatever the fuck they wanted, and then they said something about it.
Okay, Ender next.
And that's
so the Hong Kong protest. Yeah, I agree. The Hong Kong protesters are 100% terrorists, and the Chinese government need to step in and roll them over. I agree. Look, here's a difference. Now, I will say that somebody brings a bomb, they're a terrorist. I agree. But
what about a Molotov?
A Molotov? I don't know. Because you know what? Hong Kong protesters also use one Hong Kong protester literally set somebody on fucking fire. Did you know that?
Okay, that's a terrorist.
That's a terrorist. You see the problem here? Because we're talking about specific instances, and then we're like, the movement. Right, and then we're waving it over the movement, right?
But wait a minute.
And listen, and you're about to say that's what I'm doing because I'm. Yeah, I get it. But left wing hypocrite. But
here's the issue. Like you talk about the zip ties. We were just talking about the specifics. But at the end of the day, even if I concede that, like, why are we focused on zip ties when we had hundreds of days where 7% of the protests that come they brought worse than zip ties?
Why? This has gone from terrorism to rioting, and this is the problem. Is because I am not going to see Dylan Roof and someone throwing a rock on the same level ever, and I'm not going to put Dylan Roof and somebody even throwing something at Capitol Police in DC on the same level, but somebody planting bombs in DC, I will evaluate that.
Like,
I will evaluate that. Somebody assaulting the press, I'll evaluate that. Somebody smashing the press's camera, I won't say that those instances are terrorism, but they are issues. I would say they are issues that need to probably be looked at. And what I'm talking about here is one instance, and I have always told you, Rob, and I've always been very open that rioting's bad, that I don't think rioting is good. But why is it that when I try to talk about white nationalism or white supremacy, and I concentrate on this, and I'm like, let's look at this for a second, it's always what about? And not, well, is this a legitimate issue? Well, is this? Let's wait. It's always, we got to switch to over here and talk about this for a second. Which, Rob, you've talked about.
Being consistent is really important to knowing what your motivations are.
Okay, listen to me. I'll do it right now. I'll do it anyway. Anybody who attacked a business, fuck you.
No.
Fuck you. No, let me finish. Let me finish. No, wait. We're live on my stream too. So look, everybody who attacked a business, you're bad. Everybody who took bombs, you're bad, and you're actually a terrorist for you trying to use bombs. Look, I'll do it right now. Now, can we get back to what we were talking about?
But but here's the problem. Wait. Yes, that's fine. But what do you want? So, for example, before they even broke into the Capitol, I was doing a live stream saying this is wrong. If you had a problem with BLM clashing with police, then you should have a problem with what's going on at the Capitol right now. I said that as it was going. Never once have I defended the people that rioted against the police or things like that at the Capitol. I haven't. So I go on panel show after panel show where people want to be like, maybe not you. Maybe not you. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Though I still would articulate that
I would like to be clear. I can't answer for other people's
stuff. I understand. But this is the importance. When we're having the conversation, very rarely is it me and you, right? Most of the time it's me and a bunch of other people and you're hosting the panel, right? That's the way it goes. And so these people didn't speak up when I was speaking up about this violence. And there are people in your chat right now. I know because I've seen the people in your chat that are saying, well, it's just what about, isn't there a difference? There's a difference between the riots that occurred this summer. Go ahead, read your chat. Someone said that in the past minute, guaranteed. Guaranteed they're saying it. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not going to be lectured by people that made excuses for riots all summer as to why this riot's bad. And the reason that's important is, Dylan, I like you. I like Endernax. I like Aftershock. I like CTV. Let's be honest. We're not people in positions of power. We don't influence the cultural narrative. We don't create laws. But the people that do those things have almost universally forgiven or made excuses for the riots we saw that were of a greater magnitude and of a greater quantity that occurred all summer. Now they are nakedly, for partisan reasons, exploiting what happened January 6th to pass a bunch of authoritarian bullshit, including 25,000 troops on the street of DC, including a fence. Remember, walls don't work. All of a sudden we have a fence with razor wire up around the Capitol. And they're talking about 9/11 commissions to go after Trump supporters. They're justified kicking Trump supporters off of line.
Well, let me be clear. Number one, walls don't work because the vast majority of drug smuggling actually was for points of entry and visa overstays. That's why the wall wouldn't work or would have been wasteful. Not when you're trying to protect a specific institution in one city. That's the difference there. So walls won't work. I don't think applies to this situation.
But that's a nuanced conversation, right? And I actually kind of agree more with Dylan, but it doesn't matter. The point, the only thing I wanted to say was that whataboutism only applies when you ignore the initial point. If you answer the point and then you bring up something else, that's not actually whataboutism. It's not a logical fallacy. It's you saying, okay, I addressed your point. Now you address my point.
And then did. And so let's get back to I
completely agree that white nationalism and white supremacists are a huge problem in the United States, in large part because both ends have become extremely politically radicalized and also begun to accept that political violence is okay for achieving their political aims. And this is true for both sides, unironically. Slightly more Republicans than Democrats believe so. It's like 33 to 30%. I've talked about this on stream. So what do we do to address the root causes of white nationalism? Well, I think personally, you invest in middle America. You invest in these small towns that are dying, in the places that have lost jobs, have lost manufacturing jobs, that are addicted to opiates, because these are dens for radicalization. When you live in a trailer park in a town that's dying and your entire community, you have like one option, that's to work at McDonald's. Well, it's pretty obvious we need to solve the root cause of the problem, which is that these people, because of their material conditions, because of the communities that they found themselves in, where there's, they're the institutions that they've relied on for decades and decades and decades have been taken away. We need to put those back. So, we need to give these people the support that they need. And that's true for the inner city too.
Well, no, I agree that economic desperation will mean people grab onto things like white nationalism and white supremacy and radical ideas at a higher rate. You look at any society, Weimar Germany, anywhere, that is the truth. But in some of our most economically most prosperous times, post-World War II, Black people are getting hosed down and dogs are still being sent at them. So obviously, it isn't just economic desperation that has caused racism. Because when we had the most prosperous times in our country, Black people were still getting brutalized, and many of the times they were excluded from that same amount of economic prosperity. We can look at Black Wall Street.
I agree.
And I don't think it is just a discussion of let's give poor people more money and then the racism will go away. We need to address the failure of Reconstruction. We need to address this conspiracy peddling that's been going on. We need to address the escalation of rhetoric from all the way back when we had, and I'll bring it back to where it was, Rush Limbaugh to Trump, and the type of dialogue that led to the position where we escalated right now. I don't think it's just an economic issue. I think that's kind of reductionist.
That's true. But here's the problem, right? Like, it's ignoring the other side of the equation. So the truth is, look, I'm not going to defend everything Rush Limbaugh or Trump said. I would have to see specifically exactly what you're saying. But here's the truth.
I can link you some stuff if you want.
Well, I'm not going to defend everything he's saying. Like, for example, I've been staunchly pro-LGBT gay marriage and stuff for a long, long time. I'm clearly not going to defend anyone who was against that. I don't know that means they're a horrible, evil man, but I digress. The point is this: like, what this ignores is that someone like Trump wasn't the disease; he's the symptom. Right.
True.
The reality is that we've seen so much of the narrative that's been controlled by our culture, which politics is downstream of, that has exacerbated this idea that there are people that are oppressors and therefore they are to be frowned upon. And we divide people, whether it be based on race, whether it be based on gender, whether it be based on religion, etc. And we say these certain people are the problem. Their ancestor did something bad. They have this privilege. They're responsible for things that happened in the past. And the reality is this is a tool that's being used by people in positions of power to cause division so that we don't all look together and say, you know what, the people that are suffering in rural America, in Appalachia that are white, and the people that are suffering in inner city Detroit that are Black, they actually have way more in common than they have difference. And that's that the system hasn't helped either of them for years. It's exploited them on both ends. But the problem is and there used to be this argument that you would hear from people on the left that said racism requires prejudice plus power. Right. And the idea was, which it's a bullshit argument. There's some truth. You could be a racist with no power whatsoever, but there's some truth to that idea. We see now that every major institution in this country can't wait to crawl over themselves to talk about systemic racism and the issues that come with Black America. So there are voices. Every institution, they might be bullshitting, but those voices are there. Meanwhile, we're still telling people that happen to be poor and white, you have privilege. Where's your privilege? Like, so the implication is you failed at life despite being given the upper hand, and you've still failed. And so that sort of stuff, that rhetoric for a solid 30 years that's been going on, particularly in academia, and now it's been going elsewhere. Don't you think that's going to create actual more races?
You know
Don't
what?
you think that's going to create more animosity?
I will say this. I don't know if I do think that when white people hear the idea that they have white privilege, that might be like, I don't like that idea because I had to face through struggles. But you know what? Doesn't make it not true. And you know what? Sometimes the truth hurts. I do think so. And the reason why is I can look at data to show that if I went and smoked weed and my girlfriend went and smoked weed, she's more likely to be locked up and given a harsher sentence for doing it. And you know what?
That's bullshit. That's not true. The exact opposite's true.
It's 100%. Wait, it's more likely that I get arrested and I given a harsher sentence for being white.
Yes. No, for being a man.
Well, okay, I have masculine. Okay, I agree with
look,
that
the
issue.
data,
wait. Okay. I didn't. You know what? I didn't calculate the masculine feminine thing. Let's do it. Okay, let's say I was dating a man, and let's get back to the basics and isolate the race, so we don't have to isolate the gender issues too.
Fair.
Because I can tell you, I care about men's issues. I talk about like male rape victims all the time and the type of services they should be given. But let's say I was me, and let's say my boyfriend. Let's say I was dating a black guy. I was arrested, and then he was arrested. Wait, no, start from the beginning. Fuck, I'm messing this up again. Let's say we both smoke weed. It's more likely that he gets arrested and given a harsher sentence than I do. And you know what? That's a disadvantage he has to face, and that's something that I have an advantage over him for succeeding in the long term in life. That does not discount the struggles that I went through when it comes to my family and drug abuse, homelessness, poverty. That doesn't discount your certain struggle. That's just trying to highlight another person's struggle that they get from the color of their skin. And I don't think we should see that as you need to feel guilty. Just this is something that should be acknowledged, the disadvantages other people face because of the way they look.
So there's three things to say there. One, it is just ironic that you brought up you and your girlfriend, because actually most of the data suggests that the discrepancy between men and women in law enforcement is 6 times worse than the discrepancy between whites and blacks. So if that would mean that the aggrieved nature of men over women, we would have a misandrist country because men are far more likely to be
and we do in that instance. We do when it comes to sentencing and parental rights. Yes, I will say. I don't know if it's misandrist. I would say it's toxic. I don't know if I'm going to use the word misandrist, but I would say that is a challenge men have to face that women don't, and that is an instance of privilege women have.
Okay, so that would be female privilege. Second, the second part is like but that'll get important to the third point. The second point, just real quick, is I think that a lot of your data, just because the data shows that there's a discrepancy, that it doesn't necessarily prove that there's bigotry. For example, I would be interested to see the data. I think that if you took people of color that weren't in urban areas and whether or not their incarceration rates and things like that would be as skewed as it is for people in urban areas, because I think the problem is if you have high population density with critical poverty, you're more likely to see more policing, which leads to more of the things we're saying. And because black people predominantly live in those areas, it skews the statistics to show. Now, that's not to say I'm not.
We can talk about the effects of broken window policing. Stop and frisk was primarily used against black people. And you know what? I'll even throw Democrats under. I'll throw Bloomberg under the day for that. Fuck that Democrat for doing that to the black community. Also, New York City probably shouldn't have monitored Muslims. There's another one. I'll take a few jabs in New York there. I'll throw my own side under the bed.
This is good.
But that's good, but that's not what anyways, we'll just move on to the third point. The point is this, and you make this argument, you just made it for me. The truth is there is white privilege. There's also black privilege. There's male privilege. There's female privilege. There's straight privilege. There's gay privilege. There's Christian privilege, right? They're all privileged.
Can I ask you?
There are times, depending on where you're at geographically, the situation you're in, there are times when being each of these categories could be a detriment or a privilege. Right. And the fact that we only focus on one of those. What do you think happens to a population when they're told over and over? But you don't think that there aren't times that it's advantageous to be a person of color in this country?
I think, maybe when you're rapping a certain song, that might be a privilege that I could give the black community.
Well, a lot more.
Well, okay. What's the other advantages that black people get over? Is it going to be like college admissions? Are we going to talk about that?
No, it's not just that. There's tons of things. Like there's all sorts of things. Like, for example, diversity is something that is valued almost sacrosanct in this country. So if you're a corporation or you're a university, you absolutely want to be able to show off by showing how much diversity you have. And because it's the same way that there is male privilege in nursing. It's harder to get, there are less male nurses, but if you happen to be a male nurse, there's a privilege because people want to hire you so they could say, in part, so they could say,
the thing that gets me about that and being an instance of privilege is it's weird for me to say that's an instance of privilege because companies get to show off that they have like a higher number of minority groups in their employment, showing that minority group is underemployed in high sectors, actually showing the economic devastation black people have to face through things like redlining, underemployment, and not getting attention to the economic issues, or the fact that when the Great Depression happened, for example, here's another example that this would be something that could historically play into now, that who was laid off first during the Great Depression? Black people. They were the first one kicked out the door because they're going to kick out a black union man before they kick out a white union man. And a lot of unions would not stand up for the black man, but they would stand up for the white man. And those types of things have long-lasting effects. And I would say that, companies like to show that stuff off sometimes, but the fact that they even can shows the inherent inherent devastation caused to the black community by these economic policies.
Wait. I think politicians purposefully avoid fixing these economic crises within these communities on purpose to use it as a wedge issue for elections to come in. And I know this is like a Republican talking point. I sincerely actually believe this now because it's like impossible. How can we know for literally decades and decades and decades and decades, but the political aisle that's supposedly advocating for these people, despite numerous supermajorities and vast control over the government, we're unable to pass legislation or pass bills.
You know what? I agree with you. Southern Democrats fucked us over in the 60s. I'll point to that because you want to talk about when we had the supermajorities? It was FDR. And it was when we had the Southern Democrat as one of the main pillars for Democratic control. And you want to know what the Southern Democrats did in the filibuster when it was still 67? And by the way, to break a filibuster back in the day, you need to have 67 Senate votes. Yep. They actually lowered it to 60. And you want to know what they did? They used the filibuster specifically to stop ending issues of segregation. And I'll call out my old party's history for that. I'll do it right now. But now, Southern Democratic base has been hollowed out. We can't say Raphael Warnock and Ossoff are the same Southern Democrats that we saw back in the day if we're going to point to people like Strom Thurmond, right? It is just not the same base, different ideological foundations. So I will say, yes, I wish the Democrats acted more, but we also need to understand that the people who made up the party was different and the goals of those people were different.
No, I understand completely, right? And I think that there's people right now who are advocating for different types of policy that would directly alleviate all of these different imbalances, I guess you could say, in the American economy when it comes to certain groups of people having more wealth than others. But those people aren't holding majority power, and it seems like whenever the Democratic Party wait. It's not, and I understand. Listen, I get Republicans bad no matter what. Yeah, like they're never going to do better. Okay, I get it. Okay, so Joe Biden's in, right? He promised stimulus. He promised to help the poorest Americans. And what are they doing right now? Are they working on passing that stimulus check, huh? I guess we'll see. It was an immediate relief for American people.
Wait. So let me be clear. If you want to actually talk about this, Biden's already promised and putting through mechanisms to increase massive funding for HBCUs. HBCUs, which a lot of people, I remember when Betsy DeVos said that was an example of school choice. It actually wasn't. Black people were forced to go to HBCUs because they were restricted from the higher level colleges because of the color of their skin. That's another example on how the economic problems were put on people. And you just remove, like, say, you're free to go to all the other colleges now. Doesn't mean you just get in there. The effects of generational wealth, that's another way it played into. So that's actually one example I'd bring up Biden doing right now, which is a positive impact for the black community. Do I think he's doing enough? No. And that's why I said that when he gets into power, I will challenge him on issues that I disagree with, which I'm going to do. I will go on him about immigration. I will go with him about making sure that all these jobs that are being created in his new economic plans are union jobs. I'm going to go at him at that stuff. And when it specifically comes to the stimulus check, when it comes to the stimulus check, his stimulus is still going to be much more than the second round that was offered by the Republicans. And it's going to be much more than the $600, which Trump then afterwards tried to do to $2,000 when he should have gone for the $2,000 beforehand when they were still negotiating. You can't go after the fact and say, I wanted so much more and not put the public pressure on beforehand. Just want to throw that out there.
Why are we not attacking the root of the problem primarily rather than the cultural signaling that, you know, that white children need to learn that they're privileged and that these people are underprivileged? Why not just alleviate the privilege? Why not the underprivileged group in general?
I think that's not the center place. I don't think that's the centerpiece of Democratic thought or the Democrats. It isn't. And I know you guys say it is, but I'm a white guy, I'm a Democrat, and when they talk about this stuff, I actually don't hear it that often. And you know what? When people talk about white people and the bad white guy, you don't think my ears don't perk up? I don't hate the color of my skin. I'm a white person. I don't hate myself. Right. I don't see that same of dialogue in the circles. I mean, or white privilege discussions we have, of course, but it doesn't make me think I'm like evil or I was born wrong.
Everywhere. It's everywhere. And the fact we see one of the first things Joe Biden did do is reinstitute at the federal level the training for critical race theory that is exactly that. That's focused on basically the demonization of white people. We saw Ralph Warnock, who I believe you supported, talked about the need to fight whiteness and things like that. But that would, if you would replace the word whiteness with any other skin color, we would consider that racist. But when Ralph Warnock said it,
okay, we're about to get into a really complicated discussion that I don't know.
That's fine. I have no interest in that.
When we talk about whiteness, it's a little different than saying white people. Whiteness is an instant. Fuck, I'm not ready for this discussion.
Yeah, it's not even worth. It's not. But let's just skip it altogether. Trump funded historical black universities at higher levels than almost any president before.
And Biden's now continuing that, so we can talk about Biden's doing it and increasing it.
Okay, but the idea that we could say that that's somehow something unique that Biden's doing,
Well,
I don't see that. Now, the point
scale
to go
is
back
unique.
to this discussion of privilege,
wait. Scale is unique. If I say here's $600 and Biden says here's $1,400 on top of that, that is a difference in scale. And when we talk about stimulus checks and stimulus plans, scale is everything. Scale will determine whether we leave a recession or stay in a recession. And when we talk about getting support for communities, scale means everything. If I get $1,000 tax credit compared to a $10,000 tax credit, that can determine whether I keep my house in a pandemic.
Right, but we're still, when you're talking about the percentage increase, that's important as well. And we'll see what actually comes out of what Biden's doing. So far, I see a bunch of things talking about giving people money based on their skin color, which is itself racist. And again, gets back to the heart of what we were talking about earlier. So we want to talk about, like, I understand you said, well, it's not really privilege if they want to show off because there's less black people at these positions. But it is privilege because though it might be less likely because of the situation you're in to get to apply to MIT or to apply to Harvard. If you do get to that position, then you being a person of color, it is a privilege for you to be there. And this is true in many, many fields and in many, many ways. And the truth of the matter is this, what that ends up doing is the people, when we look at and we say, well, that's because of generational lack of wealth and things like that. Well, the question I always have is this, why do we look at a situation where we say that the person, let's say his name's Will, who's white, who's born today to a single mother who makes $20,000 a year. And then there's right next to him, his neighbor is a person named Bob, who's black, who's born to a single mother making $20,000 a year. We talk about privilege and we say, well, actually, you know, that black person's underprivileged and the white person has privilege. And the fact that, right, we see that there is not only, it's not just the programs that set up. That's important, right? The programs are important. And we can see that there are benefits and there are unique situations where if you're in a certain position, you would be advantaged to be a person of color. But it's more than that. It's the ability to be able to take pride in your heritage. It's the ability to be able to say that, you know, the problems with me, there are a bunch of people out there that recognize that there's all this stuff that's causing me to be downtrodden and there's all this help out there for me versus flyover country, people clinging to their guns and Bibles, 10-tooth rubes, right? People trying to keep the brown hordes out. These are all things that prominent Democrat media or politician people have said about Trump supporters and people in flyover country.
To be clear, though, Trump also did call for a Muslim ban. So I think the idea of trying to keep the brown hordes out kind of flies
pretty. He used
pretty.
a ban based on the countries that Obama
okay,
had already...
I know the history of the Muslim ban like the back of my hand. We can go through it, but I'm telling you, do you want to go through the history of the Muslim ban?
This is why
he banned all Muslims.
This is why
that's not because he couldn't. Because he
bother.
couldn't. He asked to do it, and then he failed, and so he did the next best thing. That's what happened.
This is the problem with Trump. This is from
Rudy Giuliani. He publicly said Trump asked me how to do a Muslim ban legally. Rudy Giuliani said this on live primetime Fox News.
This is the problem with Trump is that he's so like just brazen about everything he ever does or says that he'll go on media and say the fucking craziest shit, and then his administration tries to backpedal it as hard as possible because they're like, hey, maybe we shouldn't say like, you know, like maybe we shouldn't say that we're going to ban all Muslims. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
A total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until we can figure out what the hell is going on.
Yeah. But anyways,
I mean, it seems similar to what you suggested initially for white people.
A total and complete shutdown of whites entering the military until we can figure out what
they should all be profiled for being white because they're voluntarily entering.
Wait, how's that different than extreme vetting? That's different than a ban. Are we really going to say that's the same thing? Are we really going to pretend that's the same thing?
Are you going to
call for a ban? Did I call on a ban of white people entering the military?
A stand down?
Oh my goodness!
A stand down is not a ban. A stand down is different.
Christ, the two of you. My goodness. My goodness.
Now I have
See what happens
power.
when the shaman and the seer wolf
go
by
the way, can we I got one bipartisan thing. I got one bipartisan thing we can all agree on. How about we just said
hold on, no.
I got a bipartisan thing.
Well, I muted Dylan. You know what? All three of you. Now you're all three muted, right?
Wow.
Now you get see aftershock. Wow. He's still here, right? Because he was acting right. Jesus. When the alpha starts speaking in the wolf, you gotta listen, right? Dylan, I know you respect that. I know you can respect that, right? So, all right. Now, we're a little excited here.
Now that everyone's muted.
Yeah, Internet sent me a message and said he needed to say something because he had to go, right? Yeah. So I want to make sure he gets to say what he needs to say, and then you guys can go right back at it, all right? So, Internet.
Oh, I was just gonna say I have to leave early because I told my buddy I would help him with his resume so he can apply for jobs. So I gotta go. I'll see you guys. Have a good night.
Good man. Take it easy, man.
Adios.
Go ahead, Dylan.
Okay. So here's my bipartisan position. we all saw the Mars thing, right? Like, you know, we got the rover on Mars.
I saw the Bernie Sanders meme on Mars. I thought that was good again.
Here's my thing. How about we all get together and we create a cruise missile made of actual Ted Cruz and send him to Mars?
Wow.
Ted. Not looking good for Ted.
Not looking good. I mean, come on. That was something that baffles me too, right? The whole Cancun thing, that really baffles me.
Here's what gets me about it, right? Like, there oftentimes in politics, right? There is stuff, and I'm sure Dylan, you would agree with this, and you as well after Shock and CTV. There's what we would consider the right thing to do, right? But then aside from that, aren't you baffled sometimes at, well, even if you don't believe that, what is the smart thing to do, right? So it's like, even if Ted Cruz was like, hey, I don't give a shit, I'll go to Cancun, like, not the best time, right? Like you don't realize how this looks bad.
Yeah.
Now, I think I put this, just to be clear, I put this on par basically with the Nancy Pelosi ice cream debacle, right? Where it's just total tone deafness. I don't think it's hypocrisy because Ted Cruz wasn't telling people not to leave their homes, but it's tone deaf, right?
Yeah.
It's showing you live in opulence while the people that you claim to be representing are in a really terrible struggle. So I don't think it's as bad as situations we've seen, like the conservative guy in Canada that flew to Cancun after he was telling people not to travel, or, you know, Nancy Pelosi going to a salon after she told people not to go. That stuff's hypocrisy and worse, but it's bad. It's tone deaf.
The thing that gets me about it is the two things that stacked. First, it was him getting called out for mocking California, saying we should preserve energy, and then his own state facing like a winter crisis where now 16 people have like frozen to death or been killed by the disaster. And he was like to that, like, okay. And he was like, I did it wrong, shrugged, and then the next day after he says that, he does this whole Cancun trip, which was planned last minute too. That's what gets me the most, is this wasn't something that was like 3 months in advance, where he was like, didn't know this was gonna happen and did it. He planned it, texted his neighbors about it, and then was like, going to Cancun, and then he comes back and ties up federal resources to cops who have to be there for when he comes back into Texas, who should be out there helping people.
But come on now, that's not his fault, because a bunch of lunatics might attack him. I mean, come on, it's not his fault that cops had to show up because a bunch of lunatics may attack him.
Well,
like we used to take it serious when Congress people thought threatened. Oh yeah, that was January 6th.
I think it's here. Of course, I think the cops should have been there that he came back, but if he wouldn't have gone in the first place, there wouldn't have been no cops.
I guess. But listen, let's be honest though, and I will fully say that it's bad.
And I love he came back with the Texas fucking mask too. He came back with the Texas mask.
He should just own it. Like he should. Like that's the best way to get out of this for him. I don't think it's the end of the world, and I don't think he should have to resign. But again, it's funny. It's one thing for like I'll cover it. Like I'll agree with you. It's bad optically. I just think it's funny for the people that wanted to ignore. I don't give a shit what their politics was, left or right. The people that said you need to be locked down and then didn't. Right? They went out and had Thanksgiving dinner, or they went to restaurants or whatever. Like that's 10 times worse than this. And it seems like not really talking about just regular Joe Schmoes on the left, but the people that control the narrative in our country, it seems like they didn't really care about that stuff that much. But all of a sudden with Ted Cruz, it's, man, we're just like, you know, but whatever. It was a dumb look for Cruz. I acknowledge, you know,
man,
it would have been worse. What's that?
The left TM, right? Why it was just trying to laugh at Ted.
It's not, but this is what, right? This is what, when you and other people say, well, wait a minute, why do we talk about this stuff? You don't think it matters who the people in positions of power, like what they're up to?
I do think it matters. It's just, I just don't know, like, where were all these same people calling out this, and that? Like, when we're trying to call out this person now, like I think it was. I think Nancy Pelosi was tone deaf when she did the ice cream thing. I agree. I would say that generally politicians are not really the greatest at like feeling connected to the struggles of everyday Americans. I think Ted Cruz is the same thing. But the thing that's different about this one is it isn't something where like it's something where it should have been very clear, considering this is his state. He is the senator of his state. There's people freezing to death, and he does it last second, right? Like, this is a last-second decision he made in his life to do this, right? Nancy Pelosi buys.
If that's true, and I have no reason to disagree with you. Like,
well, that was confirmed by. Well, it depends. Okay. Maybe it was.
Because I said it's different if it was like there was a wedding plan.
And it was. He decided this. Different. He was like, "Oh, we're cold. We should go to Cancun." That was literally it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to defend it. I'm not.
How about he stays in Cancun? How about he stays in Cancun? He goes there and just stays.
No. He would govern too well for Cancun. We don't want that.
So wait, so
right.
this is okay. So Trump negotiated NAFTA.
Hold on.
What if?
Hold on. I think it's important to point out that Operation Madman is back in the room, and at this moment in time, instead of throwing it to her first,
You're such a gentleman.
I try to be. I try to be, right? I'm going to throw it to Aftershock, and then it's going to Madman, and we're going to get a little bit of a break here.
Where's the magic
right?
notepad, Dylan?
Wow, you're right.
You're slacking, man. You didn't even see me. I was like,
bro, I don't even know why you're looking at Dylan. You clearly don't understand which Discord you're in. You're in the woods.
You must assert your dominance as a wolf.
It's all right. No
one
knows
me. Different rules, right? So anyway,
so,
Aftershock, go ahead, and then the Madman.
So let me try to bring it back to what we were originally talking about, and I'll tie it with this idea of whataboutism, and I think it's gotten used as a deflection primarily on the left, and it happens on the right too, but it's used as a deflection to actually answer for the biggest problem that we have, the empirical problem, which is hypocrisy and what our leaders are actually doing and why they're doing it, right? What are their motivations? Because it matters, like take Ted Cruz, will I say what he did was bad? Of course, it's fucking stupid. I can't believe he did that. But the same people who are saying, oh my God, Ted Cruz, oh, look at Ted Cruz, were the same people that were quiet about countless Democrats going against their own rules that they set for the people. So like you said, people are freezing to death while Ted Cruz goes to Cancun. Of course, so was Cuomo while people were starving and didn't have a job and couldn't feed their families. And it also depends, like going back to this like white nationalist extremism in the army, right? In the army, it also depends on how we do it. It depends on how we do it, and should we trust the people who are doing this with that kind of power? And that's where it ties into whataboutism, because it's pointing out hypocrisy, it's pointing out consistency and what they're actually thinking. Do they actually believe the things that they're telling us? Because as we see, if they actually did, they wouldn't have broken their own rules. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, with questioning how we go about it. And even if you do say like, well, they said they're going to do it in this way and that's it, but we can still have questions, because obviously things can change and they can be used to push an agenda or a narrative, and that's the only problem that I have with it. I
understand. What was that?
Like, that's one of the problems that I have with it, basically.
Batman, go ahead.
You're talking about like the whataboutisms, and that always happens. It's like I see it as being like a left and a right trait, and especially when I'm trying to convince my fellow conservatives to stop bringing up the hypocrisy that we see, because it's very blatant to us that we see that like the mainstream media or whatever is allowed in certain social media environments, like you are allowed to berate one person with a political affiliation and not another, because anytime you do, they always go, oh, that's whataboutism. It's kind of written off. So we need to just stop doing that and just realize that we are not held to the same standards as the liberal or progressive mass of people. And I think something that could bring us together on both sides of the aisle is realizing that these politicians, all of them, are fucking insane. They don't give a fuck about any of us. So of course they're doing, I don't know anything about this trip to Cancun. Is that what you said? I don't know anything about that.
Cancun, Mexico.
I don't know. I never heard anything about this, but I mean, of course they're going to like leave people behind in a crisis when they should be there tackling the issues, or they have their freezer full of ice cream while they're shutting down businesses. And then we have Newsom that's going to, the French Laundry. I mean, we have to realize that this could bring us together if we realize that, they're not really our friends. And
sure, I mean, like I agree with you.
Most of them are probably psychopaths. Or
I agree with you, but I think a big way to get there is kind of what we're having now, like Dylan and us. Like, notice how all the conservatives have said what Ted Cruz did was stupid. Dylan has also said that about his side. I think that's how we get there as well, because a big part of getting these kind of politicians out there is by informing the public that they really don't give a shit about you, and their actions prove it.
You know what? I think, I hate to bring it back to Trump, but I think he failed on the NAFTA stuff. I don't know why when he renegotiated it, he didn't make it so Ted Cruz, who was in Canada, now is America, also gets to go to Mexico at some point. And we should have a circular system where every few years he is traded between the 3 Northern American countries. We should share this burden. And I think this is a huge benefit of globalism that we're not taking advantage of. And he failed in renegotiating NAFTA to include that in it. And I don't know why the conservatives did not call for it like I did at the time. So now, Rob, would you call for Ted Cruz to be included in the NAFTA agreement? Wonderful.
No,
Wonderful.
Because here's the thing: Ted Cruz is clearly the best senator we have. So why would we want to exchange our intellectual prowess with the dirty people of Mexico?
No, Rob. I was told that was Cuomo.
Wait.
Oh, it's Cuomo. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't care. I don't like. By the way, I love Mexico. I think that like the Mexican, like the heritage of Mexico and stuff, I think it's fascinating. I think that like it's a huge mistake. I understand there's a lot of problems with its governance now, but like I started to like read some books about the history of Mexico and stuff, and I actually think it's fascinating. The landscape and stuff is absolutely gorgeous too. So a lot of the shitting we do on of Mexico. So you know, I don't want to send Ted Cruz to live in the land of opulence in Cancun.
Well, also,
you know, the rest of us are struggling, even if it meant renegotiating. What is it? It's not NAFTA now. What is
NAFTA.
it? It's the what's the word they use for it? It's,
I don't know. The North American Freedom of It's So Much Better Trump Best Team Ever negotiation table.
Right. The acronym, it just flows off the tongue. Whatever it is. It's no TPP.
The USMCA.
CTV,
the USMCA.
What do you think about all of this? Because I don't.
What are you
I
two
barely
cents?
heard you talk at all.
So remember that when Dylan's on a panel arguing with you, he's not claiming to be a legitimate political commentator. He's claiming to be an entertainer.
That's what Tucker. Did you see the Tucker Carlson defense?
He defended that,
yeah, that's absurd to me. I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
Tell
like
me about
at least I will say
Tell
this
me
about
it
Tucker.
before you say anything more.
I don't remember enough to talk about it, but I just remember it was something.
What?
Fuck,
You brought it up.
Yeah, I know, but that's why I asked him if he remembered it. That's why I asked if he remembered it.
It was something to this. There was a court case that someone alleged Tucker had basically slandered them, and Tucker's defense was, "Well, my show's not a straight news show; it's more of an opinion show.
Piece.
It's more entertainment,
Yes.
right?" But Tucker's been pretty open about that. And at least I have no love for Fox News. I actually like Tucker, but I have no love for the institution of Fox News. Fox does call their people commentators more like than some of the other networks. Some of the other networks have people on and they call them like their news correspondents. Like Don Lemon's not a news correspondent. So if you're just out in the open, you say he's a commentator. Like that's more legitimate. That doesn't mean that you should favor someone just blatantly lying.
Here, you literally can't believe the facts Tucker Carlson tells you, says Fox lawyers. I remember what the quote was, but it was something along the lines of like, fuck. If somebody, excuse my language, if somebody in chat could find me the, no one could reasonably believe my show. Where is it? Fox persuasively argues that given Mr. Carlson's reputation, any reasonable viewer arrives with an appropriate amount of skepticism about the statement he makes. Like, that's literally them saying, look, my credibility's shot. So if you come into my show and you believe everything I say, you're kind of stupid. I mean, it's just a really funny argument.
I'll have to look up the specifics of the case, but you're looking at this NPA. I mean, look, I always think it's funny. Like, I happen to like Tucker. I think that he's right more often than he's wrong. But I always think it's funny that there's this go-to to be like, well, fuck. I had this happen the other day when I was debating Destiny. I mentioned something from the Epic Times. And like everyone's big take was like, Epic Times?
Okay. Like when you say Epic Times, you're not be EPIC, you're to Epoch. Like EPIC.
Yeah, is that how you pronounce it?
I have no clue, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I don't know if they're they seem to me to be a similar type organization as like, I don't know, like BuzzFeed or
I don't know, because
or Vox or something like that. It's just they're right leaning.
The thing about
it's just funny. I just always think it's funny where like way back in the day we've gone with this like Fox News. Oh, Fox News is a joke. Don't get me wrong, Fox News is a joke. But like this seemed to have stemmed from the Iraq War. Like I think we're letting the other networks off the hook. Didn't they all push that bullshit too? You know, and it's like we just had 4 years of like incredible missed stories all in one direction by the majority of these other networks. So I'm not saying that means Fox is good. I'm not saying that at all. But it's just funny when people say, I don't trust your news source. It's like, okay, where's your news source? You're going to use BuzzFeed? You're going to use Vox?
It does feel like a lot of like terms are just like really diluted now, that they're just like completely overused, and certain things like, racism or sexist or homophobe or whatever, and they throw out these descriptive words that don't really have anything to do with the situation sometimes. So it gives the word itself less credibility, which is why so many people don't trust the news anymore.
Hey, I just read an unbelievable article in the Epoch Times. Really? What's that? Those ads with that intro was on like all over YouTube.
That guy, right?
Then and there'd be a woman right next to him. Really? What's the Epoch Times? And it's just the most like cheesy thing. And then it'd be like, I just read this amazing article about how the CCP with the mysterious origins of the virus, about how they were created possibly in a Wuhan lab, and then it'd go off into its tangent, right? And that's the thing, is how it advertises itself, and a lot of times how it publishes stories is these large elaborate stories of kind of like just asking the questions, right? Where it's like, and this is the same, and I have similar problems with BuzzFeed, but it's BuzzFeed have different problems with how they report stuff. BuzzFeed, the way it reports is made like, man, isn't this suspicious? Isn't this suspicious? Isn't this suspicious? Could it be? And then it drops it there, right? Where it's, and that kind of leaving like that amount of like you just kind of scratching your head at it, when I feel like it needs to be clear about the definite facts of a case and whether like, well, this is unproven and this is not that, but it's kind of like the like, I'm just asking questions type reporting, which can lead to like some like dangerous stuff, because it means that you could just make claims that later lead people to claims that later are completely disproven, like the Wuhan lab thing, which recently, after, and now you can say the WHO isn't a reliable source, the WHO has all but ruled out that it started in a Wuhan lab.
Yeah, the WHO is a joke, but let me say about this, like, I actually basically agree with your take here. Like, I try my best not to put yourself in a conservative's shoes, right? If someone's like, well, CNN says, it would be easy for me to be like, but I try not to do that, because to me, what matters is the type of claim that the outlet's making. So the reputation of the outlet might matter if the story is something like you're suggesting. Well, we're just asking questions, or we have this anonymous source. Like, that's different. If CNN says, look, here's the quote of Donald Trump saying this, I'm not going to disbelieve it just because it's CNN. If they're actually sourcing the quote, and I think a lot of conservatives make that mistake. They're like, I don't trust this news outlet, so anything they say, I'm not going to trust. But there's different, right? There's opinion reporting, and then there's like factually sourcing. And certainly I think the left does that a lot too. In my experience, I'm biased, but I think they do it more when I'm on panels. Well, they'll just be like, well, where'd you hear that? And if I say, well, this study comes from an article that was published in Breitbart, they're like, oh, well, that's it. We can't trust that.
You want to know what happened to me recently? I was reading my English textbook and it cited Breitbart, and I thought that was like super interesting.
The news outlet or
the news outlet?
Oh, okay.
And it was really interesting to me. And then again, my English textbook is all about rhetoric and debate, which is, I'm having a really interesting English semester because it's actually teaching me about like logical fallacies and stuff like that, which I think is a really cool like class for English. And it was like almost a mandatory class too, which I think was super cool that they made that mandatory at my college for you to learn about rhetoric and learn about how to actually have conversations. But when it comes, I can agree with you that like certain news outlets will use clickbaity information and stuff like that. The specific thing I don't like about the Epoch Times, which I think is not unique to the Epoch Times, is unique to a lot of kind of conspiracy-driven outlets. Whether it be like some, like, I would say Gray Zone might be something I could point to as something that's a left-leaning conspiracy-driven outlet. It's like, these are just, it feels more like storytelling than reporting a lot of times. Like, this is something that maybe could be going on. It's trying to paint narratives, but it's using skepticism and questions as the way to do it. And it's not sourcing it in like proven instances, right?
What's worse, do you think? Do you think that having some sort of skepticism or open, like plausible deniability, some sort of way where you're like, you have, journalists or some sort of a news outlet saying like, these are the questions that we want answered. Do you think that that is worse than an obviously slanted, biased news source that writes stories and articles that are obviously just so biased and dishonest? What's worse?
1 second. Let me respond to something in the chat. Rage Weapon, I want you to know I watched Democracy Now! All throughout high school. That was one of my main sources of news was Democracy Now! So I don't really have much bad to say about Amy Goodman. Okay, so could you pose the question one more time? I didn't hear the end of it. I'm sorry.
Which type of news reporting or journalistic style is worse to you? a news source that's asking questions that are open-ended, or a news source journalist that is being obviously biased and dishonest and slanted?
I would say dishonesty is one thing, slant is another, right? Like if I'm lying to you is one thing. But for example, let's say I say Ted Cruz went to Cancun, did this, did that. That's all true. But then at the end of it, it's like, this guy should resign, That's then opinion, right? And there's problems with that, but that's different than speculation off of shaky information, and is also different than me just lying to you, right? Like if I, for example, Rob, if I said, Ted Cruz went to Cancun and did something that was bad, he should resign. I didn't lie there. I said something you could disagree with when it comes to that later part. I didn't like lie about the information. But the problem is, these also aren't open-ended questions. They're asking questions, but then kind of vaguing towards the conclusion of it being in a Wuhan lab, which is the problem I have. If you're just asking questions like, yo, what is this? What is this? Like if an article like unanswered questions about COVID-19, that's fine. But if it's like unanswered questions about how it could be from a Wuhan lab, that's different.
Well, I agree, but certainly, like, I think from my perspective that we see the average, what you would call the establishment mainstream media, like that's exactly one of the big things they do that's wrong. So, for example, if they're covering the riot that occurred January 6th, they'll say the Capitol insurrection, right? Like it's clear that
or saying that they were white nationalists,
right? The language and the tone they're using, it's clear that they're pushing what they want their narrative to be in the middle of giving actual details of the story, right? Like this happens all the time. Or the even worse, what happens is the air of omission, right? Where they'll let out, so the fine people hoax. Almost all of the mainstream media reported the hoax that said Donald Trump said people were fine people on both sides. That's a true statement. And then it started to imply, this means that he was implying that white supremacists are good people. They leave out the fact that in the very next paragraph, he says, clearly I'm not talking about white nationalists, KKK, neo-Nazis. They're all terrible people that should be condemned. So they technically told the truth, but they had an air of omission that allowed them to then spin the narrative. So basically almost every mainstream journalist outlet is guilty of this to some extent. And it's why journalism's garbage in this country now. I can't think of one outlet that I would say it's trying to call things balls and strikes down the middle. The closest is maybe like Rising Point on the Hill. Might be the closest.
I was actually on Rising the other a few days.
Oh,
ago.
were you?
Like I wasn't a guest. They actually like pulled out one of my tweets, and I was fucking baffled. I'm not actually a huge fan of Rising. I mean, if we want to say balls and strikes, I guess you say C-SPAN, right? Which that's literally.
Yeah, but it's just
but I guess the
thing
I would
you could say that. But go ahead.
But of course, but the thing is, it's nearly impossible to remove all bias from a program, and Rising obviously has bias as well. You can tell because you could say that it has bias, and this is real bias, anti-establishment bias, right? The just assumption of like the establishment is doing this bad thing, the establishment's doing this bad thing, and it could just be something that's like this normal everyday just occurrence, right?
But that's what we expected. The press is supposed to be adversarial.
Yeah, it's supposed to be adversarial. Right? It's supposed to be adversarial. Yeah, and different press institutions are adversarial towards different other institutions, right?
True.
For example, like if I establish a news outlet, Rob, my news outlet, and I'm very open with this, is not going to be, this is something that happened. Good day. It's going to have a certain slant because I'm establishing this press outlet to attack a very certain institution, right? And to challenge a very certain institution. Well, does that mean I should admit certain information? No, I would make sure that it tries to cover both, but I'm going to direct it a certain way. Now, there's different problems when you come to mass media, and things of like media institutions on the larger level. And I think a lot of this has to go back to the, what was it called? Not the freedom. This is an old ruling. It was right before Rush Limbaugh started talking on the radio. And it was something somebody in chat knows, but it was the Fairness Doctrine, I think it was called.
Yeah.
The Fairness Doctrine is what a lot of people root these problems back to, because then it allowed for partisan media, extremely partisan media, which does not give time for people to like air their concerns from both sides, which then leads to a stronger partisan divides in the country, which then leads to rising tensions. A lot of people will point to the 1987 Fairness Doctrine being like removed. Which I think I don't know enough about it, but I think that's something that should be looked at.
I mean, to me, it just seems. I think it's funny. Like I do have to get going here soon, but I'll just say that I think it's funny. Like a lot of the conversations from people that used to I used to think talked a lot about what's the ruling Citizens United, right? You hear particularly a lot of people on the left talk about Citizens United and we need to get money out of politics, but those same people seemingly have no problem that we could look at like Pew Research, that shows that a research, I think it was Pew, said something to this effect that in the presidential coverage with the mainstream networks, the main networks, 92% of the coverage of Donald Trump from like July to October, the end of October, was negative.
Did it include Fox News? Because I was reading that. No, I don't think it didn't include Fox News, which is a huge. It's for the largest media like.
But listen, there's two things to say about that. This was just focusing on the networks, right? So it didn't look into CNN, MSNBC. It just looked at the networks, right? Secondly, I don't disagree. Like Fox News, I would actually like to see what the numbers are because I know that, again, I don't like Fox. I don't watch Fox. I'll admit that I like Tucker. I usually only watch his opening monologue. That's about it. That's all I see on Fox. But what you did see of Fox was they were getting increasingly less supportive of Trump. So that you certainly have your Hannitys. I would say Tucker's one of them. I would say Greg Gutfeld, Jesse Waters. These are people that Trump all the way, basically. But then you had your Brett Baers. You had your the guy that hosted the debate, Chris Wallace. You had Juan Williams. You had Gerald. Like you had these people also on there that were pushing back. There seemed to be more of a willingness to put people on Fox, including people that literally were running, time slots that were getting a lot of viewers that were basically all out against Trump, like Chris Wallace. So I would be interested to see those numbers. I don't think they'll be as stark as we see in the other networks. And the other thing is, it's almost irrelevant what Fox said, because let me ask you this question, Dylan. Don't you think the average Fox viewer was already going to vote for Trump? The election was going to come down to undecided.
Yeah, but of course, the problem isn't just about who wins the election. It's the general rhetoric in the country and the amount of partisanship, which can lead to disastrous consequences. For example, Trump lost the election, but I think increasing partisanship can lead to violence. It can lead to extremely negative outcomes. It can lead to instability. So I don't think just extreme partisanship in media.
I mean, sorry, let me finish. Sorry, I talked over you.
So the partisanship is one thing, and I would say when you talk about Fox News bringing on conservative voices, bringing on oppositional voices, it's also because I think bringing on opposition is profitable. I should know more than anybody that bringing on people you disagree with and having them lob shit at each other is profitable. I run the Hippy Dippy Roundtable, and you want to know who gets the most views on my show? It's the Hippy Dippy Roundtable. It's not my coverage of foreign policy and the nitty-gritty of the recent strike in northern Iraq and Kurdistan. Nobody gave a fuck about that. You know what my highest views today were? When I walked in this room. And it's because there's opposition. And so I think that's part of the reason they do it. And I want to tell you, I watch a lot of...
Hold on. You can't say that. No. The reason why your viewership went up is because you're hanging out in the fucking wolf's den.
True. And I'm a shaman wolf and they respect the status. But when I go to Al Jazeera brings on... And Al Jazeera is not a pro-Trump platform, but they bring on people who support Trump to spar with people. And I think the later stages of Fox, I think they saw what Trump was doing later in his presidency with a lot of the claims that were completely unsubstantiated around the election. And after the Capitol riots, I think they just basically dropped the ball and pieced out of there. Even OAN at the end, when they had Chuck Liddell's an MMA fighter. When they had
the Iceman?
When the Iceman does a section on election fraud. But they had the My Pillow guy, do a whole segment on the election possibly being stolen and all this data, which completely just riddled with holes. And before it, so they don't have to catch any flack, they do like the whole we basically want our ass covered if all of this is bullshit legal statement, and then let them air a 2 to 3 hour basically dossier on whether the election was stolen. And they are trying to be prepared because they know the fallout from what Trump did later in his presidency is real.
You're worried about the divide in the country because it could lead to violence, and I absolutely agree with you that is a possibility, and it's certainly our future if we keep going down the road that we're going down.
Yeah.
And so you say that the election wasn't stolen. If big tech hadn't kept shutting down the stories saying that it was, and people were able to was able to fight those stories with logic instead, you know, because I'm all for free speech and I want people to be able to say how they feel about certain issues. But instead of that happening, it exacerbated the issue. It's the same with the QAnon bullshit. It makes more people that believe in this QAnon shit, if they keep getting shut down and shut out of the conversation, instead of people going, hey, these are all of the reasons why I think QAnon is bullshit, and there's a lot of reasons out there. All you've done is made those people more extreme, and it goes the same with anything else that you want to, you know,
I disagree
keep people out of the conversation.
I disagree with you on this, and I can tell you, I'm a foreign policy guy, but when people claim that let's say, that what's happening in Xinjiang isn't real, and there's people who believe that, and when they say that, the amount of time it takes to, okay, here's something that's a conspiracy theory that people believe in, Pipelineistan, the idea that we got involved in Syria because there was a pipeline that was proposed by Qatar to the government of Assad, and that's the real reason we got involved in Syria. And I remember Tim Pool made the claim recently when he was talking to Destiny, and I have done like 5 segments digging into why that it was structurally impossible, how Assad has never talked about this publicly or used it as a reason, on how we don't even have complete confirmation of the hearing, we don't have actually reliable sources to know that the meeting even happened in the first place, the problems with the whole, and I go through all of it. It took somebody 10 seconds to say it. It takes me 5 to 6 hours to prove why it's wrong. And so when somebody's out there spewing bullshit about QAnon for 5 hours, this takes days upon days upon days to sift through it all to prove why it's not wrong. 1 or 2 true fact-checking organizations aren't enough to go through all of that.
I'm not talking about fact checkers. I'm talking about open conversation between people.
But if Rob Noor came on here, and let's say, I'm just going to use Rob Noor as the target because, you know, he's a conservative target, right? Let's say he came on here and he said, Pipelineistan is real, right? And it's 100% real, Dylan. I disagree with you. And the amount of time it would take me to explain why it's not real is much larger than the amount of time it took him to make the claim. Here's another example. The Holocaust didn't happen. Let's say somebody said that on this platform. The amount of time it takes me to disprove the ideas of like, well, it was functionally impossible. How do you do 6 million in this amount of time? The amount of time it takes me to disprove that with historical data, the research, is so much more. So there is a race happening, and the race is between the people who are spreading disinformation and the people trying to counter it. And the people who are spreading disinformation have a structural advantage when it comes to rhetoric, and that's the problem. And how do we address that structural advantage when they have mass media? They can use mass media like Facebook and Twitter to spread the disinformation at faster rates than ever before. There's a reason why conspiracy theories are rising better than ever, and it's because they have access to things like Facebook, Twitter, and unfiltered outlets.
Okay, but listen, the truth is that actually there's a massive structural advantage when it comes not just to the Democratic Party, but actually to establishment politics in general. So you talk about unhinged conspiracy theories. We literally have the president of the United States who claimed that the reason that he entered the race was that he heard Trump called Nazis good people. This was spread by almost every single mainstream outlet. They also said things like Trump said to drink bleach. This was also a lie. They spread these obviously provable conspiracy theories. The problem is, and as did Democratic politicians, as did so who gets to decide, well, this is clearly a conspiracy theory, therefore we need to pull it down, when the very people that will be making those decisions are more than willing to spread obvious bullshit when it benefits themselves.
That's why I think it needs to be pretty specific about a platform's rules around a conspiracy theory and what is a conspiracy theory, because people can say something. For example, if there's
that's easy though. The lines are already drawn.
It's
Liberal
not
and progressive
easy.
Ideas are accepted.
It's not easy.
It's very cut and dry for me, anyways.
Okay, I
can already tell that if it's some right-wing crazy conspiracy theory, it will not pass.
Here's the thing. I can say that when it comes to let's, for example, I want to address a few of the claims you made, but that, I'll do it. Can I ask you, who were the good people on the other side, not from mine, but on the other side at Charlottesville? Who were those good people?
So the New York Times, for example, did an expose that it talked specifically about a woman whose group came that wanted to defend the rights of free speech. She said that she came with a group of like 30. She just wanted to defend free speech. She thought Unite the Right meant right-wing people. When she showed up, she was aghast to see how many people were wielding like Nazi symbolism and things like that. But still, she supported the right for those statues to stay up. In addition, we had militia people that were there for the stated purpose of protecting and making sure that there was no conflict that occurred from either side. You even had the ACLU standing on the side of the people that were there. And let me last say this, even if you were to prove that there were no good people there, which is a statement that I don't think that you'll be able to prove, but even if you were able to prove that, it's still then, it's not that Trump was saying Nazis were good people. He misinterpreted who was there. Right? When he clearly says, I think there were good people there, I'm not talking about the white supremacists. He's clearly, so at best you could say, well, you're mistaken. They were all white supremacists. That wasn't the case, but even if it was the case, that's not Trump saying Nazis are good people.
So when it comes to him saying there's good people on both sides, you're talking about people, the best people we could think of are people who didn't know that it was actually an organizing event by a bunch of white race.
No.
So those
wait,
let me finish.
No, because you're wrong.
Okay.
Because you're wrong.
No,
You
I'm
didn't
right,
give anybody else a chance to answer. You just Rob was the only one that answered. Maybe Aftershock or CTV has a different opinion too. According to what President Trump said, and I hate bringing it up to you because I know you're taking a logical fallacy class, but he used a slippery slope argument. He was saying that people were there that were afraid that, who knows, maybe the next statue that was going to be torn down was perhaps a George Washington statue, because he was around when slavery was there. So that was the argument that he used, is that there were people there that were just defending history. So that's all I wanted to add. I just wanted to say that.
Okay. So the best people that were there when it comes to the other side were people who did not know it was organized by a lot of people who were racist, white nationalists, white supremacists. The best people were uninformed people who kind of stumbled there not knowing what was going on about what really at the event. Like you said, those women who were there to just defend free speech with 30 people at the event and were horrified at what they saw. That, I would say, maybe they're decent humans, but stumbling there just makes them unresponsible people if they don't know what's really going on, didn't do the proper research.
What does that matter, though?
Because the thing is, if I am at an event and I just saw white nationalists run over people, right, ram a car into it, commit a terror attack, and all that situation, it doesn't. Now, I'm gonna say that the idea of the president of the United States coming out and saying, trying to do a kind of both sides in that instance, like there was good people on both sides, doesn't make sense to me. Why would he do that? What was the point of that?
I'll tell you if you want. The point was this, because he saw what was going to happen in the country the rest of his tenure, which was this. He was trying to make the argument that the mainstream media was covering for the fact that many of the people that were on the other side were huge pieces of shit that show up to engage in mutual conflict with the huge pieces of shit that showed up on the other side. The problem was they were being lionized as they were some sort of heroes. So these were violent people that maybe agreed with Black Lives Matter, violent people that agreed with an Antifa ideology. They showed up with weapons. They were prepared to fight. The ACLU even said that it was as if the police were encouraging the fighting because they intentionally made the two groups go together. I analyzed hours upon hours of footage where you could see shitheads from both sides. On some portions of it, clearly it was the white supremacists starting violence. Other times you would see the police forcing people to walk away and other people coming up behind them and smashing them with sticks and stuff. Trump was disgusted at the fact that this was just being painted as, oh, Trump supporters are evil, horrible people, and we need to condemn them. So Trump was making this argument, look, there were good people on both sides. There were bad people on both sides. The hatred, the division needs to end. This is the exact same type of rhetoric that someone like Bernie Sanders used when one of his supporters shot a bunch of people. He didn't say my rhetoric is bad, my supporters are bad. He said we need to condemn violence on all sides. That's what Trump was trying to do. The media were looking for this. Remember, Trump gave 3 speeches after Charlottesville. The first speech, he specifically condemned racism and violence. He said it happened under Obama. It happened before Obama. It's happened since the beginning of time in the beginning of this country. And we need to condemn this racism and violence. That wasn't enough for the sharks in the media. They said, why didn't you specifically name the KKK? Why didn't you specifically name the Nazis? So he gave a second speech where he specifically named the KKK and Nazis. That wasn't enough for the media. So the third speech, he said, I want to give a speech on this economic plan that I have, and I'll take questions. And the media started screaming, Mr. Trump, what about the Nazis? What about the... And so he said, that's when he said this conversation. He said, look, there were good and bad people on both sides. The point is we need to end this violence. We need to tone down the rhetoric. And then people started to say, are you saying that not, or they were like, what do you mean? Are you saying Nazis are good people? He says, of course not. We obviously condemn the Nazis, the neo-Nazis, the KKK. It's racial bigotry. It should be avoided, as I said in my other speeches. And the media still kept saying, so you're saying racists are good? No, that's not what he said. He never said that, ever. And our president, real quick, the president of the United States today ran on the platform of Trump said Nazis were good people, which is one of the most damaging, divisive. You talk about political rhetoric causing division. What would you do if you think that the president of the United States supports Nazis? Do you think you would engage in violence?
I will not say that the president of the United States directly says I love the Nazis. I won't say that. I will say that he's done a shit job at trying to stop them. And this is the
really
thing. Yes, let me tell you exactly why. After Reconstruction, there was a narrative built, and this was the narrative of the Brother War. The idea that the Civil War was two groups of honorable men beating each other in blood-filled content with brother. Oh, it's so sad. It's so tragic that these brothers killed each other, right? That's the idea. It was the Brother War. And at the end of the day, the narrative that was eventually built about the Civil War was that there was this grand battle where there was bad things done by both sides, and this side came out on top, and now it's a time for reconciliation. And that narrative about the Brother War and a bunch of other political factors led to the troops being pulled out of the South and the Compromise of 1876, and led after that withdrawal, after their compromise, all the black officials that got elected to office, they eventually got pushed out. All of the Klan was able to make a resurgence eventually after the first Klan was smashed by Ulysses S. Grant. And what I see as a failure of Reconstruction, I see similarly in the speeches we talk about today when we talk about good people on both sides, is that what we have here is a failure to clearly draw the lines of racism and those group and anyone who aligns themselves with that group. I see that as un-American. Racism and sexism and bigotry as an un-American value. And that is what I wanted the president to say at that speech. Just hammer that home. And he doesn't make that a part of his narrative generally. He has not. And he himself has encouraged bigotry. He has.
So Dylan, the problem that I have with what you're saying.
Okay, if I said I wanted to ban Jews from entering America, that 100% would be called bigoted.
Hey,
but he says I want to ban
Muslims.
Hey,
Jesus. I'm going to take the mic for a minute. See, and the beautiful thing about me having the mic is nobody even has to talk. You know, we can just chill out for a sec. All right. Arguing these points is pointless. Right? It's pointless. Because here's the reality. Reality is that no matter how you want to take the Civil War history and look at it to bring us to the present, the reality is that both political parties have been playing the people against each other. And this is why I hate I hate arguing partisan rhetoric, because it's fucking pointless. Both sides are playing in the middle. And that's what we keep seeing. That's what I keep seeing election after election, right? It's the same bullshit. Reality is that back in the day when Republicans were standing for the government not being involved in an issue, they allowed it to be involved in an issue to a point, and then and that happens on both sides. So now, because of the Civil War, and because of the way in which the Constitution itself was corrupted from the beginning, this is where like all of these partisan talking points about what we're seeing today needs to be about fixing the root document, right? Because everything that you guys point to for racism can also be pointed to class. It can be pointed to jurisdictions of cities and where these things are happening and how the laws are being implemented, right? So there's a conversation amongst all of it, but at the root of a lot of it is violations of civil liberties and people's freedoms. And then not being able to enact a meaningful change on it because the federal government is the one that is doing this, and it's so hard to get any type of change to happen for the people because that government is so far and away from the individual. This is why I also hate the party lines when it comes, because it's like anytime I'm talking to somebody now anymore, it just feels like I hear the left or the right talking points, and instead of people being able to genuinely come into a conversation, had it happened last night with Fanatic as a prime example, right? Last night was a prime example of somebody that just only wanted to argue their side, didn't want to genuinely be in the conversation and go, hey, you've got a point there. And that's where the conversations really break down.
Quick
So
question.
we got to figure out some kind of way to find this middle ground instead of it just remaining partisan.
What were you and guys Fanatic talking about? I'm actually super curious.
Let's see. He hopped in last night. We were talking about welfare and slavery.
Oh, okay. I don't want to be rude, but I got to get something to drink.
I am going to have to go.
No, that's not what was being discussed.
What was being discussed?
Welfare and slavery.
Well, okay, yeah, welfare and slavery, but you guys were trying to take it there when that actually wasn't the argument. The argument was Redneck was saying that he was comparing the Democrats, enslaving the population, and that it's like a plantation and stuff like that, and that like they use welfare as like the whip and everything. And the problem that me and Fanatic had was that kind of rhetoric is exactly the kind of rhetoric that the left uses all the time, that we look down upon, but yet here we are using it again. And that's the thing the problem that I had with Redneck. I was just like, we don't need to do that. I understand if you want to use their standards to prove that them wrong, use their logic against them, but saying like, oh, we're still in a plantation, we're still in slavery, we're still being whipped and stuff, I think that's counterproductive. And where you guys were trying to bring it to was, hypothetically, is welfare slavery? And that's where you guys were trying to take it to, and that's not what we were saying.
Well, Aftershock, the reality when it comes to all of these different arguments, it's not about trying to like break the argument so completely apart that you're like, well, that just doesn't make any sense. What you should be trying to do is just understand the idea that the person's trying to convey, right? Because if you don't, then you're assuming that person should know everything that you know, and there's never any allowances for language and the understanding of it, right? So that's where like you could definitely point to where there's a difference between debate and conversation, and I'm always going to be in the camp of I'm having conversations, right? And in conversations, things are a little bit more laid back. It should be about understanding ideas, and you know what I mean? So,
but my problem is the tactics that are being used within these discussions, and the kind of tactics that aren't useful, and that kind of rhetoric is not useful. It's what the left does, and sure, it works for them, but it's not going to work for us. And even if it did work for us, I wouldn't want to do that because I think we're better than that. I think we don't need it. I think we can prove them wrong with their own double standards, with their own hypocrisy, with their own quotes, and with their own standards that they can't even meet.
See, and then Rob, this goes back to one of the things that I felt like we needed to talk about, which was, earlier we were talking about levels of argument, right? So like, I might not be able to make a point in a particular conversation as well as you can because you know all the details about this and can definitely speak on it a lot better. And there'll probably be issues where I could do the exact opposite, where I'm the one and then you're not, you know what I mean? And this is where like conservatives working together when it comes to tackling these conversations, that's where it can become really useful, because the analogy that Redneck used was not out of the ballpark of the ability to be able to understand, because what he was talking about was removal of choice, right? And so he's saying it the best way that he knows how. And that's how I saw
no, he
was
trying to. No, he wasn't.
That's what I saw.
He outright admitted he knew what he was doing. He just didn't care because he wanted to fight fire with fire. That's his literal quote.
Whether or not
he was like, "I'm fucking sick of this bullshit. I want to fight fire with fire."
But whether or not it doesn't stop the validity of the idea that he's trying to convey with it, right?
No, because it's not valid.
No, it is valid. Choices are being removed from people.
But that's not the argument, though. That's not the argument, though.
That is
you're trying to take it there because that's a place where you can theoretically and metaphorically argue from it, but that's not what we were saying. We were talking about the specific use of slavery, plantation, and whip. We're talking about the rhetoric, the connotation, the pictures that get implemented in people's. No, but you're trying to take it to, well, is welfare technically slavery? That's not what I'm saying. That's not what we're saying. We're saying don't use slavery, don't use plantation, because it's the same thing we see on the left where they compare Trump to Hitler, Trump supporters to Nazis, and then we're saying like, wow, that's fucking stupid. Like you're using that kind of tactic, and that's gross.
So true.
Right, but the reality is though is that
what's not true?
The idea is still there.
No, I said it is true.
Oh, it is true. Okay, yeah.
No,
like, why are we using their tactic?
Actually,
can I interject briefly?
I also want to get to what CTV said before we change the topic to what was being argued last night.
I just want to interject to say that I actually do have to get going for real.
Conservative and fighting.
So thank you all. Thank you, especially CTV, for having me on. Thank you,
Rob,
everyone.
Enjoy your baby.
Rob, before
it was nice to talk to you too.
Thank you.
Rob, it's always a blast. Enjoy your baby.
Rob, before you go, I don't know if it's going to be Monday or
have a good baby.
It's going to be Monday. It's going to be Monday or Tuesday. Me, you, Internax, and Lecture Fan are going to be getting together. No interruptions next time, right?
Okay. Sorry.
The room's going to be closed. No. Dylan's not going to be able to come in here, right, and hijack the stream, right? So,
yeah,
he's so good at it.
I'm like a train robber. I just came in here and came out with the content.
Be within the definition of insurrection, but I think.
Do you think it was seditious? Do you think there were people there acting seditiously?
Very, very few.
Very few.
We saw most of the people that were there were just fucking around. They were taking Snapchats. They were on their phone laughing, just looking around like, oh shit, wow, cool. Of course, I'll concede there were people there that wanted to do harm. I'll even concede that I don't think a lot of the people that were there were Antifa in disguise. I didn't hold that standard when I said that about the Black Lives Matter riots. I'm not going to hold that standard now.
Do you think there's a problem with the existence of the whole?
Hey, I just got a great suggestion for you, Dylan. Right? Whenever you go through your gun buying process, you should record that. You should stream it. That way, everybody knows what this process.
So here's my
like.
social security number. I filled it in
here.
You
know what I mean? Come on, be real. You know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So, but that would be a great, especially since you have an audience of a lot of left-leaning people that might not have any experience at all with firearms. You can take them through the process. I think that would be an excellent thing for you to do.
So, it doesn't take a lot of people to shut down a country or shut down a system. When you look at revolutions or when protests work, it's like, I forget the data, but it's like if you can get to like 3 to 4% of the people of the nation on the street, or like 5, then like usually protests succeed. And it shows that you don't need to like, everybody doesn't need to act a certain way for something to succeed in its sedition or for bad things to happen, right?
Okay.
For example, like the American Revolution was not, the vast majority of people at the time when it like was all starting didn't want separation from the United States, right? The mass majority who were there didn't want to overthrow the government. But there were certain people that dragged the movement in a certain direction, in a negative direction, that eventually led, well, not the revolution in this instance, that eventually led to what occurred there. And I would say that the existence of the whole rally in the first place is also a problem. Because why were they there? They were there to stop the steal. What steal?
But hold on. But what were they going to do to stop the steal?
Well, it depends. Some people plan to do certain things that were bad and cite stuff. Others just plan to be there and rally. So it depends on who we're specifically talking about. But even the existence of the whole event isn't problematic from a free speech perspective, but is problematic from just working off of facts and logic perspective. The rally shouldn't even have happened. If it was a let's pressure the Democrats rally, that's a different thing. Like, we are going to pressure these Democrats through their administration. It wasn't. It was, this election was stolen, and the president was trying to pressure Mike Pence to overturn the election. It was there to pressure the president, the vice president of the United States into doing something he doesn't even have the constitutional power to do. And then when he didn't do it, people got really fucking mad, and they charged. And then they went into the...
Dylan.
Yeah.
Do you and I'm not going to like, you know, kind of like with what answer you give me. I don't think like I don't think you're like dumb or anything like that. Yeah, go ahead.
After this, I'm going to answer Madman's question to me.
Sure. Because I genuinely want to know, do you think everything that Trump did, obviously I'll side with you here. I don't think the election was stolen. I don't think Trump should have held that rally. I don't think he should have said a lot of the things he should have said. Sure, we can meet there. Do you think though that everything he was doing was system, like he was saying, okay, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna do that, and then on the day I'm gonna but specifically
I don't
because
think so.
because I'm trying to get detailed. Okay, well that's what matters then. Right, that's what matters.
That's not all that what matters. And because
when you're blaming Trump for it, like.
Well, the thing is, okay, but if my irresponsible language and irresponsible rhetoric lead to bad consequences, that still matters, even if I didn't mean to lead to those bad consequences. And not to mention, like, there's recent reports that are coming out about dialogue he's had in private that I haven't even went through on stream that has to do with them trying to get him to do
McCarthy, right?
Yeah, McCarthy, which showed just his hesitation to even act after it happened, which showed maybe he didn't want it to happen, but he kind of, I think, looked at the situation as like a little bit like, fuck him. And he tweeted afterwards, like, this is what happens when you don't play, and then eventually had to kind of reverse and be like, I love you, you're very special, go home, and eventually went into the whole thing. So even if he didn't want it to happen, his actions surrounding it were terribly irresponsible that helped lead to it. If let me ask you this, Aftershock. Let's say you thought someone stole this country and you thought horrible things were going to happen, terrible things, and an election in your democracy, the foundation of our country, was stolen, and it was a stolen election, and somebody who is going to do the worst things possible, bring communism to the United States, and you were at the capital of that nation, would you not be like, I'm gonna do something? I would. If I legitimately thought the election was stolen and all these bad, horrible things were gonna happen, I would think it would be the job of every American to stand up and do something. And that's what was scary, because he was painting a picture like that's what happened, and any God-fearing American, if they actually thought that was happened, any God-fearing, fucking reasonable American would do that. And that's what gets me, is because he exploited people's patriotism with conspiracy theories to make them take, to not make them take, but led them to taking those actions.